I'm glad to have you here. Follow my story until the end and comment the city you're watching from. It was a crisp October evening in Austin when my doorbell chimed. I smoothed my cardigan and took a deep breath, trying to calm the flutter of nerves in my stomach. After months of hearing about her, I was finally going to meet the mysterious Spanish woman who had captured my son's heart. I, Jennifer Brown, had spent the afternoon preparing Jacob's favorite foods pot roast with all the trimmings, homemade apple pie cooling on the counter. At 62, I still found comfort in the kitchen, a habit from my 30 years teaching Spanish at Austin High before retirement. My late husband Robert had always said my cooking could solve international crises. I smiled at the memory as I opened the front door. "Mom," Jacob's familiar voice filled the entryway as he wrapped me in a warm hug. At 35, my son had grown into a handsome man with his father's height and my stubborn chin. The software engineering career had been good to him after a string of romantic disappointments had left him cautious and reserved. But the woman standing slightly behind him was anything but reserved. "Mrs. Brown," she said, stepping forward and taking both my hands in hers. "I am Mia Garcia. Jacob has told me so much about you. I am so excited to finally meet the woman who raised such a wonderful man." Mia was everything Jacob had described in his breathless phone calls: petite, elegant, with dark hair cascading over her shoulders in glossy waves. Her accent was melodic, tinged with just enough Spanish inflection to be charming rather than difficult to understand. Her smile seemed to light up her entire face. "Please, call me Jennifer," I replied, returning her smile. "Come in, both of you. Dinner's almost ready." As they stepped inside, I couldn't help noticing how Mia's eyes took in everything: the family photographs on the mantelpiece, the comfortable but well-maintained furnishings, the small collection of pottery I'd brought back from my travels through Spain decades earlier. "Your home is lovely," Mia said, pausing before a photo of Robert. "Is this Jacob's father? He has his eyes." "Yes, that's Robert. He passed away 5 years ago. Jacob told me. I am sorry for your loss. 5 years is not so long for the heart." I was touched by her perception. After my string of encounters with Jacob's previous girlfriends, women who could barely remember my name, Mia's genuine interest in our family felt refreshing. During dinner, Mia asked thoughtful questions about my teaching career, my time in Spain, and the family history behind various heirlooms visible around the dining room. She helped clear plates without being asked, and complimented each dish with what seemed like sincere appreciation. "Mom spent 4 years in Madrid after college," Jacob said proudly, reaching for Mia's hand across the table. "She taught English there before coming back to Texas to teach Spanish here." "Really?" Mia's perfectly arched eyebrows rose with interest. "Your Spanish must be excellent then," I smiled modestly. "That was many years ago. I'm afraid it's quite rusty now." "Nonsense," Jacob interjected. "Mom won the district's Language Teacher of the Year award 7 times. She's just being humble." "Mia speaks 5 languages fluently," he added, squeezing her hand. "She's been teaching me Spanish, though I'm terrible at it." "You are being modest," Mia laughed, her eyes twinkling. "His pronunciation is, how do you say, endearing." We all laughed, and I found myself thinking that Jacob had finally found someone worthy of him, someone with substance, intelligence, and genuine warmth. After dinner, Jacob excused himself to take an important work call. "Crisis at the office," he explained apologetically. "Shouldn't take more than 10 minutes. As he disappeared into the hallway, I began gathering plates to take to the kitchen. Mia immediately stood to help. "Please, let me," she offered. "It's the least I can do after such a wonderful meal." We worked side by side loading the dishwasher when her phone rang. She glanced at the screen. "I should take this," she said. "It's my mother. She worries if I don't answer." She stepped into the living room, answering in rapid Spanish. Her voice carried easily through the open floor plan of my home, the casual confidence of someone speaking their native language with no concern about being understood. I continued rinsing dishes, my hands moving automatically as my ears perked up at the sound of familiar phrases. My Spanish might have been rusty for casual conversation, but understanding it, that was like riding a bicycle, something you never truly forget. "See, Mama," Mia was saying. "She seems harmless enough, old, clearly desperate to keep her son happy. She'll be easy to manage once we're married." My hands froze, a dinner plate suspended halfway between the table and the sink. Had I misheard, "The house is lovely," Mia continued, her voice lower now, but still audible. "Bigger than Jacob described. And yes, there are definitely family assets to consider. She mentioned his father left them very comfortable." I set the plate down silently, my heart beginning to pound against my ribs. Don't worry, Mia laughed. The sound musical but suddenly cold to my ears. I've already started working on the inheritance angle. Americans are so sentimental about family legacy. I leaned against the counter, struggling to make sense of what I was hearing. This couldn't be the same woman who had been so warm and engaging throughout dinner. Jacob is perfect for this naive, generous, and completely infatuated. The green card will be simple once we're married, and the divorce even simpler once I have what I need. 2 years maximum. Then I'll be free to return to Madrid with American citizenship and enough money to live exactly as I choose. The serving spoon I'd been holding clattered against the tile floor, the sound echoing like a gunshot in the sudden silence. Mrs. Brown? Mia appeared in the doorway, her face a mask of concern. Are you all right? Perfect performance. I thought numbly. If I hadn't just heard her true intentions in crystal clear Spanish, I might have believed the worry in her eyes was genuine. Just clumsy, I managed, kneeling to retrieve the spoon, despite the protest from my knees. These old hands aren't what they used to be. She hurried to help me, her movements graceful and considerate. Please let me do this. You shouldn't be cleaning up after hosting such a wonderful dinner. The irony was suffocating. This woman had just finished explaining to her mother how she planned to manipulate and eventually rob my son, and now she was helping me clean up dropped utensils with the tenderness of a caring daughter-in-law. I have much experience with cleaning, she said with a self-deprecating laugh. I worked in hotels in Barcelona before meeting Jacob. Very humbling work, but it taught me to appreciate when others make effort for me. Another lie delivered with such sincerity that I almost believed it myself. Almost. Jacob returned from his call, apologizing profusely. Sorry about that. Crisis at the site, but it's handled now. He surveyed the scene of us cleaning up together and his face lit up. Look at you two already acting like family. Mia stood gracefully, disposing of the paper towel she'd used to wipe the floor. Your mother is wonderful, Jacob. So warm and welcoming. I feel very lucky. She was good, professionally good. Every gesture, every expression, every carefully chosen word was designed to reinforce the narrative she'd constructed, the grateful foreign girl, charmed by American family values and eager to belong. I found my voice somehow. Well, aren't you sweet? Jacob's right. You do seem like family already. We settled in the living room with coffee, and Mia regaled us with what I now knew were carefully crafted stories about her life in Spain, the struggling artist narrative, the difficult childhood that made her appreciate Jacob's stability, the dreams of building a life in America with the right partner. Every word was calculated, designed to hit Jacob's protective instincts and his desire to rescue, and it was working beautifully. My son hung on every syllable, his eyes soft with the kind of love that makes smart men do incredibly stupid things. Tell Mom about the visa situation, Jacob prompted gently. She might have some insights. She's always been good at navigating bureaucracy. Mia's eyes flickered almost imperceptibly, but her smile never wavered. Oh, it's complicated, but not urgent. The tourist visa is good for several more months, and Jacob has been helping me understand the process for more permanent arrangements. The pause was perfectly timed, allowing Jacob to fill in the romantic implications without her having to lie outright. We're thinking about engagement soon, Jacob said, reaching for her hand. Once Mia's settled and comfortable with the idea of staying permanently. Oh, I said, proud of how steady my voice sounded. When you know, I suppose. Mia ducked her head modestly. I never expected to find someone like Jacob. Sometimes the heart surprises us. Indeed. My heart had definitely been surprised tonight, just not in the way she meant. As the evening wound down and Jacob walked Mia to her car, I stood at the window watching them embrace. She was saying something that made him laugh, probably spinning another beautiful lie about their future together. He looked so happy, so hopeful, so completely unaware that the woman in his arms saw him as nothing more than a stepping stone to American citizenship and whatever money she could extract from our family. The question was, what was I going to do about it? I didn't sleep that night. Instead, I sat in Robert's old study, surrounded by financial documents and family records, trying to understand exactly what Mia thought she was targeting. Robert had been a careful man, methodical in his approach to financial security. Our assets weren't flashy, but they were substantial. The house alone was worth close to $800,000, sitting on 2 acres in one of Austin's most desirable neighborhoods. The investment portfolios, retirement accounts, and life insurance policies painted a picture of comfortable upper-middle-class wealth. Nothing extravagant, but certainly enough to tempt someone with Mia's apparent agenda. What chilled me most was how efficiently she'd assessed our situation. One dinner and she'd already calculated inheritance angles and timeline strategies. This wasn't impulsive opportunism. This was professional predation. As dawn painted the sky in watercolor hues, I made two decisions. First, I would not tell Jacob what I'd overheard. Not yet. He was so deeply infatuated that any accusation from me would only drive him closer to her. Cast me as the jealous mother who couldn't accept her son's happiness. I'd seen enough Lifetime movies to know how that story ended. Second, I needed to know exactly who Mia Garcia really was. The next morning, my phone rang just as I was pouring my second cup of coffee. Jacob's name flashed on the screen, and my heart clenched with guilt. How do you talk to your child when you know something that will devastate them, but can't prove it yet? Morning, Mom. Thanks again for last night. Mia couldn't stop talking about how wonderful you were. I bet she couldn't. She's lovely, sweetheart, I said, the lie tasting bitter on my tongue. I can see why you're so taken with her. I'm thinking about proposing soon, he said, his voice bright with excitement. Maybe Christmas. I know it's fast, but when it's right, it's right. Christmas. 2 months away. My stomach nodded. That's wonderful news. Jacob, have you thought about what kind of proposal where you might do it? As he chatted about his romantic plans, I was calculating timelines in my head. If they married quickly after the holidays, she'd have her green card application filed by spring. 2 years later, she'd be eligible for permanent residency. 3 years after that, full citizenship. Then the divorce. Carefully timed to maximize her take from community property. 5 years. She was planning to systematically destroy my son's life over 5 years. Mom, you still there? Sorry, darling, just thinking about how happy this makes me. The lie came easier than expected. Have you met her family yet? Her parents? Not in person, but we video chat with them sometimes. They live in Barcelona. Her father's a retired teacher. Her mother works in local government. Very traditional family, which is why she's being careful about the engagement timeline. They want to meet me properly first. Traditional family. If they truly existed, they were probably horrified by their daughter's immigration fraud scheme. Or maybe they were in on it, coaching her through her long-distance destruction of an American family. That sounds reasonable, I said carefully. Maybe you should visit them before proposing. Really understand where she comes from. Actually, they're planning to visit us next month. Mia wanted them to meet you before we make anything official. She values family approval. Of course, she did. Meet the Marks family, charm the parents, establish herself as the perfect future daughter-in-law, then spring the engagement and rush toward marriage before anyone had time to ask difficult questions. After Jacob hung up, I sat staring into my cooling coffee, feeling the weight of impossible choices. I could hire a private investigator, but that felt like crossing a line that would damage my relationship with Jacob. Regardless of what we found, I could confront Mia directly, but she was clearly skilled at manipulation, and I had only an overheard phone conversation as evidence. Or I could be patient, play the long game. Let her think she was winning while I gathered the information I needed to expose her completely. That's when I remembered my niece, Emma Martinez, my sister's youngest daughter who worked for the State Department in visa services. Family connections could be remarkably useful when you needed to understand immigration fraud. An hour later, I was sitting across from Emma at our favorite cafe, stirring my iced tea slowly as she studied my face with concern. Aunt Jennifer, you're putting me in a very difficult position, Emma said, her voice careful. I'm not asking you to do anything inappropriate, I replied. I just want to understand the general process. Educational purposes only. Emma laughed despite herself. Educational purposes, right? And this has nothing to do with Jacob's mysterious Spanish girlfriend you're meeting for the first time tonight. Actually, I met her last night, and I leaned back in my chair, studying my niece's face. Emma had inherited the family's sharp instincts and no-nonsense attitude. If anyone could help me navigate this situation without judging me or thinking I was a paranoid old woman, it was her. Tell me what you know, she said quietly. Everything. So I did. The overheard phone conversation, the calculated charm, the timeline for marriage and citizenship. Everything. Emma listened without interruption, her expression growing more serious with each detail. There are red flags, she admitted when I finished. The timeline is aggressive. The backstory seems rehearsed. And frankly, the whole narrative sounds like something from the Manual on Marriage Fraud Indicators. There's a manual. Oh, Aunt Jen, there are several. Immigration fraud is a cottage industry, And we see variations of this pattern constantly. The difference is usually the sophistication level. Emma pulled out her phone and showed me a government website. Look at this checklist. How many boxes does she tick? As we went through the indicators together, my heart sank. Mia wasn't just suspicious. She was practically a case study in marriage fraud rushed timeline, financial motivation, limited verifiable background, age gap that favored the immigrant, and emotional manipulation of the American partner. The thing is, Emma continued, knowing something and proving it are very different challenges. These people are professionals. They've studied American men. They know exactly which buttons to push, and they're very good at covering their tracks. So what would you do? Emma was quiet for a long moment. Officially, I'd advise Jacob to slow down, do proper due diligence, and insist on meeting her family in Spain before making any commitments. And unofficially, I'd gather evidence, document everything, and I'd be prepared for the possibility that by the time you have proof, it might be too late to prevent the marriage, but not too late to minimize the damage. The damage, my son's broken heart, his financial losses, his faith in love itself. The ripple effects could last years, maybe decades. Some wounds never fully heal. There's something else you should know, Emma said carefully. If she's doing this professionally, Jacob probably isn't her first target. These operations often work the same territories, use similar methods. There might be other victims. Other sons. Other families destroyed by Mia's calculated charm. The thought filled me with a cold fury I'd never experienced before. How would I find them? Very carefully, Emma warned, and completely legally. But if there are patterns of behavior, they leave traces. Immigration applications, marriage records, divorce proceedings. It's all public information if you know where to look. By the time we finished lunch, I had a plan. It wasn't a nice plan, and it wasn't a simple plan, but it was thorough. If Mia Garcia was a professional con artist, she was about to discover that Jennifer Brown wasn't nearly as harmless as she appeared. That afternoon, I made 3 phone calls. The first was to a private investigator Emma had recommended, someone who specialized in background verification with impeccable discretion. The second was to my attorney, updating my will and establishing some additional financial protections that had nothing to do with Mia and everything to do with being prepared for any outcome. The third call was the most important one. Jacob, sweetheart, I've been thinking about what you said about Mia's parents visiting next month. Yeah, what about it? Well, I'd love to host them for dinner. A proper welcome to the family. And you know what, I think I should brush up on my Spanish before they arrive. Maybe take a refresher course. I'd hate for them to think I wasn't making an effort. Rain pattered against my bedroom window that night, a gentle soundtrack to my racing thoughts. The digital clock on my nightstand flipped to 2:17 a.m., mocking my attempts at sleep. I'd been staring at the ceiling for hours, my mind replaying every moment of Mia's visit like a detective reviewing surveillance footage. The family photo she'd paused at, was she calculating inheritance? The questions about Robert, were they genuine sympathy or asset assessment? The way she'd helped with dinner, was that kindness or just part of her performance? I reached for the glass of water on my nightstand, my throat dry from worry. The house creaked and settled around me, suddenly seeming too large, too empty. For the first time in years, I wished desperately that Robert was here beside me. He'd always known what to do in a crisis. What would you do? Robert, I whispered to the darkness. How would you protect our son? The silence offered no answers, but somehow asking the question aloud steadied me. Robert would have been methodical, careful. He would have gathered facts before acting. I slipped out of bed, pulled on my robe, and padded down the hallway to his study. Nothing had changed since his death. The same leather chair behind the mahogany desk, the same family photos arranged precisely on the bookshelves, the same filing cabinet in the corner containing decades of our financial life together. I opened the bottom drawer, retrieving a stack of manila folders. Our will, insurance policies, property deeds, investment accounts, all meticulously organized, labeled in Robert's neat handwriting. Even from beyond the grave, his attention to detail was a comfort. For the next hour, I went through everything, creating a comprehensive picture of what assets might be at risk if Jacob married Mia. The house was in my name alone. The retirement accounts had beneficiary designations that couldn't be easily changed, but there were liquid investments, savings accounts, and family heirlooms that could be vulnerable. But this wasn't just about money or property. This was about my son's heart, and future. I closed the files and crossed to the bookshelf, where dozens of family photos chronicled Jacob's life. Jacob at 5, missing his 2 front teeth and proudly holding a baseball. Jacob at 12, lankier now, accepting a science fair trophy. Jacob at 18 in his graduation cap and gown, Robert's arm around his shoulders, both of them beaming with identical smiles. And then the more recent photos. Jacob after college, starting his first job. Jacob with his first serious girlfriend, the one who'd left him for her boss after 2 years. Jacob with his second girlfriend, who'd seemed perfect until she began pushing him to cut ties with family and friends. Jacob alone at 30, his smile not quite reaching his eyes after that painful breakup. The pattern emerged clearly now. My son, for all his intelligence and success, had a history of choosing women who took advantage of his generosity and trusting nature. Mia was just the latest and possibly most dangerous in this pattern. But how could I make him see that without pushing him further into her arms? I returned to bed as the first hints of dawn lightened the sky, my mind clearer despite the lack of sleep. I wouldn't confront Jacob directly, not yet. I wouldn't accuse Mia without evidence. But I would investigate, document, and prepare. And I would position myself to protect my son when the time came. The private investigator Emma recommended, Marcus Reynolds, agreed to meet me the following afternoon. I chose a coffee shop halfway across town, paranoid about being seen by anyone who might know Jacob or Mia. Mrs. Brown. A voice interrupted my thoughts as I stirred my cappuccino, lost in worst-case scenarios. I looked up to see a middle-aged man with salt and pepper hair and unremarkable features, exactly the sort of person you'd pass on the street without a second glance. He wore khakis and a light blue button-down shirt, looking more like an accountant than a private investigator. Mr. Reynolds, please sit down. I gestured to the chair across from me. Call me Marcus, he smiled, setting down his coffee in a slim leather portfolio. Emma speaks very highly of you. Thank you for meeting me so quickly. Immigration fraud cases are time-sensitive, he said, opening his portfolio and retrieving a notepad. The sooner we start, the better our chances of finding something useful. Is that what this is, immigration fraud? Marcus's expression was sympathetic but direct. Based on what you've told me, yes. The pattern fits foreign national on a temporary visa, rapid relationship development, pressure toward marriage, discussions about immigration benefits, and most damning, the phone conversation you overheard planning a timeline for divorce after obtaining citizenship. Hearing it laid out so clinically made my stomach clench. So what do? We investigate, thoroughly but discreetly, Marcus explained. We verify everything: her identity, background, employment history, previous relationships, travel patterns, online activity, communications. We find inconsistencies, contradictions, evidence of deception. How long will that take? Depends on what we find and how careful she's been. Some cases break open in days. Others take weeks or months. We don't have months, I said, thinking of Jacob's Christmas proposal plans. We have maybe 8 weeks, Marcus nodded, making notes. Then we prioritize. Focus on finding any previous identity she might have used, any previous marriage fraud attempts, any criminal history. Those are the red flags that would be most compelling to your son and to immigration authorities. And how much will this cost? I asked. Though the money didn't really matter, I'd spend every penny I had to protect Jacob. Marcus named a figure that made me blink but didn't hesitate. I'll need a retainer to start, and I'll provide weekly updates. If we find nothing suspicious, I'll tell you that too. I don't manufacture evidence or create problems where none exist. I appreciate that, I said, reaching for my checkbook. I just want the truth. One more thing, Mrs. Brown. Marcus's expression grew more serious. If we do find evidence of fraud, you need to be prepared for how your son might react. Even with proof, some people refuse to believe that someone they love has deceived them. They shoot the messenger. I thought of Jacob's face when he looked at Mia, the complete trust, the utter devotion. I know, he might hate me for a while, but I'd rather have him hate me temporarily than watch him be destroyed permanently. Marcus nodded, understanding in his eyes. I'll start today. First priority is verifying her identity and checking for previous aliases or fraud patterns. As I wrote out the check for the retainer, I felt a strange mixture of dread and relief. Something was finally being done. But what would we discover, and how would those discoveries change my relationship with my only child later that day? Jacob called again, his voice excited. Mom, I just talked to Mia's parents. They're confirmed for the weekend of November 18th. Can we do dinner at your place that Saturday? November 18th, just over 3 weeks away. Of course, sweetheart, I'd be happy to host. Great, they're excited to meet you. Mia's told them all about you. I wondered what exactly she'd told them. That I was a harmless old woman, an easy mark, the mother-in-law who wouldn't interfere with their daughter's fraud scheme. Actually, Jacob, I said, inspiration striking. I was wondering if you and Mia might want to join me for dinner this weekend. Just casual. I'd like to get to know her better. This weekend. He sounded surprised but pleased. Sure, I think we're free Saturday. Let me check with Mia and get back to you. Perfect. The more time I spent with Mia, the more opportunities I'd have to catch inconsistencies in her story. And maybe, just maybe, I'd pick up more information that could help Marcus with his investigation. After hanging up, I texted Emma, having dinner with J&M again this weekend? Any specific questions I should try to ask casually? Her reply came quickly. Ask about her hometown, specific neighborhoods or schools. Fraudsters often have generic knowledge about major cities, but stumble on specific local details. Also family traditions, childhood memories. Those are harder to fabricate convincingly. I made mental notes, already planning the conversation. Then I opened my laptop and began my own research. If Mia was going to study my family for vulnerabilities, I would study her supposed home city just as thoroughly. By the time Saturday arrived, I could discuss Barcelona's neighborhoods, local festivals, and regional cuisine with enough knowledge to potentially catch her in a lie. I'd also spent hours practicing Spanish conversation with an online tutor, refreshing vocabulary and pronunciation I hadn't used in years. Mia arrived on Jacob's arm, as elegantly dressed as before, bringing a bouquet of flowers and a bottle of Spanish wine. A small thank you for having us again so soon, she said, kissing my cheek. It's so kind of you to want to know me better. If only she knew my true motivations. Dinner was a careful dance of conversation, with me inserting questions about Barcelona between discussions of Jacob's work and my gardening projects. Mia handled most of them smoothly, but I caught a flicker of hesitation when I asked about a specific local festival. Oh, La Merced, she recovered quickly. Yes, it's wonderful. The fire runs are spectacular, but it was the smallest pause. The briefest shadow across her features that gave me hope. There were cracks in her performance. I just needed to find more of them. After dinner, as Jacob helped me clear the table, Mia excused herself to take a call. My mother, she explained, stepping onto the back porch. She likes her weekend update. As soon as the door closed behind her, Jacob turned to me, his face alight. What do you think? She's amazing, right? The hope in his eyes nearly broke my resolve. She's certainly charming, I said carefully. But his smile faltered. I can hear a but in your voice. No but, I lied. I just want to make sure you're not rushing into anything. You've only known her for 6 months. When it's right, Mom, he said, the same phrase he'd used with his last girlfriend. Mia's different from anyone I've ever met. That much, at least, was true. His previous girlfriends had been opportunistic, but not calculated criminals if my suspicions about Mia were correct. I just want you to be happy, sweetheart. That, at least, was completely honest. Jacob hugged me, oblivious to the war being waged in my heart. I am happy, Mom, happier than I've ever been. Through the kitchen window, I could see Mia pacing on the porch, gesturing as she spoke into her phone. Was she updating her mother on the latest developments, reporting to whoever was orchestrating this fraud, planning the next steps in her scheme to marry my son, take what she could, and discard him? I watched her laugh at something said on the other end of the call. Her face transformed by an expression I hadn't seen before, harder, more calculating than anything she showed around Jacob. In that unguarded moment, I glimpsed the real woman behind the mask, and my determination solidified. I would save my son from her, no matter what it took. The following Tuesday, my phone rang with a number I didn't recognize. I answered cautiously. Mrs. Brown, it's Marcus Reynolds. I have some preliminary information. Can you meet today? My heart raced. Yes, of course. Same place. No, he said, his voice low. Let's be more careful. There's a bookstore on South Congress. Book People, 3rd floor, travel section. 2 p.m. Bring a guidebook to Spain and pretend to browse. The cloak and dagger approach seemed excessive, but I agreed. For the next 3 hours, I alternated between nervous anticipation and dread. What had Marcus found? Was it proof of fraud? Or would I learn I'd spent thousands of dollars investigating an innocent woman? Book People was busy with midday shoppers when I arrived. I made my way to the 3rd floor, found the travel section, and pulled a Barcelona on a budget guide from the shelf, flipping through it while my eyes scanned for Marcus. "The Sagrada Familia is worth the entrance fee," a voice said beside me. Marcus had appeared silently, also holding a travel book. "Are you planning a trip, Mrs. Brown?" "Just researching," I replied, following the script. "My son's girlfriend is from Barcelona." "Interesting city," he said, leaning closer as if to show me something in his book. "Why don't we sit? There are reading nooks around the corner." We settled into 2 armchairs partially hidden by bookshelves, our travel guides open on our laps like props in a play. "What have you found?" I asked, unable to contain myself any longer. Marcus's expression was serious. Enough to be concerned, not enough to be conclusive. "Tell me." "First, the basics," he said, keeping his voice low. "Mia Garcia entered the United States on a tourist visa 8 months ago. The address she listed on her arrival documents is a short-term rental apartment in South Austin that she vacated after 6 weeks. Right around when she met Jacob," I murmured. "Exactly. The pattern suggests systematic targeting rather than organic relationship development." He pulled out his phone, scrolling through photos. "These are from her social media accounts. In the month before she left Spain, she was researching American dating apps, joining international relationship forums, and participating in online discussions about American immigration law." He showed me screenshots of Mia's online activity, a dating profile describing her dream American man in terms that perfectly matched Jacob, posts in immigration forums asking about marriage-based green cards, searches for wealthy American cities with growing tech sectors. "This suggests premeditation," Marcus continued. "She didn't come here for tourism or education. She came with the specific purpose of finding an American husband." A chill ran through me. "What about her background, her job in Barcelona hotels?" "That's where things get interesting," Marcus said. "The company she claims to have worked for in Barcelona, it existed, but it went out of business 3 years ago. The references she provided to Jacob are fake. The phone numbers redirect to a voice service that plays pre-recorded messages." My hands gripped the travel guide so tightly my knuckles turned white. "What about her family, the parents who are supposedly visiting next month?" "I'm still working on that angle. I found no record of an Antonio and Elena Garcia matching her parents' descriptions in Barcelona. That doesn't mean they don't exist. Spain's public records aren't as accessible as American ones, but it's another red flag." "So she's definitely lying," I said, a strange relief washing over me. I wasn't paranoid. I wasn't an overprotective mother inventing problems. The threat was real. "She's definitely misrepresenting key aspects of her identity and background," Marcus confirmed. "But here's where it gets more concerning. I found evidence that suggests Mia Garcia might not be her real name." He showed me another photo on his phone, a marriage certificate from Clark County, Nevada, dated 2 years earlier. The bride's photo was unmistakably Mia, but the name listed was Maria Fuentes. "This marriage lasted exactly 20 months before ending in divorce," Marcus explained. "Just long enough to secure conditional permanent residency. The husband was a 42-year-old software engineer named Richard Donovan." My blood ran cold. "Jacob is 35 and in software development. Yes. She appears to have a type, or rather a target profile." Marcus swiped to another document, this one from Colorado. "And here's a wedding announcement from a small-town newspaper featuring Lucia Vega and her American husband, Michael Pearson. The bride in the photo is also our Mia." "How many identities does she have?" I whispered. "I've confirmed at least 3 so far. I'm still investigating whether there might be more." The bookstore around us continued its normal business customers browsing, a child laughing somewhere nearby. An announcement about an upcoming reading, but I felt disconnected from it all, as if watching from behind glass. "Both previous marriages ended with significant financial settlements," Marcus continued. "Both men are now dealing with debt and emotional trauma, and in both cases, she disappeared after securing what she wanted: permanent residency and money. I thought of Jacob, trusting, generous Jacob, and imagined him broken and bankrupt after Mia finished with him. The image was unbearable." "This isn't just fraud," Marcus said quietly. "It's a criminal enterprise. We're dealing with someone who has destroyed multiple families and shows no signs of stopping." "What do I do with this information?" I asked, my voice barely audible. Marcus leaned forward, his expression serious. "That depends on what kind of outcome you want. Do you want to save Jacob from making a terrible mistake? Or do you want to ensure Mia faces consequences for what she's already done?" "Both," I said without hesitation. "I want both." "Then we need to be strategic," he advised. "Moving too fast could spook her into disappearing before Jacob realizes what's happening. Moving too slow means watching the fraud proceed on schedule. He pulled out a timeline chart from his portfolio. Based on what you've told me, she's planning to introduce her parents next month, probably actors hired to play the role. The engagement will happen shortly after that, with a Christmas proposal that gives them just enough time for a New Year's wedding. New Year's, I repeated, seeing the pattern. Tax advantages, immigration timing, and emotional manipulation, all wrapped up in romantic symbolism. It's textbook, Marcus agreed, closing his portfolio and looking at me directly. The question is, are you prepared to play a longer game than she is? Because what comes next won't be easy for you or for Jacob. That evening, I sat in my garden watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of gold and crimson. Somewhere across town, Jacob was probably having dinner with his fraudulent girlfriend, discussing their future together, completely unaware of her true intentions. Next month, I would sit across from fake parents, speaking my rusty Spanish, and pretending to believe in a love story that was nothing more than an elaborate con. But Mia Garcia, or whatever her real name was, had made one crucial mistake in targeting our family. She'd assumed that a 62-year-old widow would be easy to fool, too polite to question, too grateful for her son's happiness to look too closely at its source. She was about to learn that assumption could be very dangerous indeed. As darkness fell, I reached a decision. I called Emma. "Aunt Jennifer, is everything okay? I need your help, Emma. Something more official than advice." I took a deep breath. Marcus found evidence of previous marriage fraud. At least 2 cases. Emma's sharp intake of breath told me everything. That's serious. Beyond what I expected. Can you connect me with someone from immigration? Someone who could intervene if we gather enough evidence. A long pause. This is crossing into territory where I need to be very careful. Aunt Jennifer, my job. I know, and I'd never ask you to compromise your position, but this woman has victimized multiple men. She's planning to do the same to Jacob. There must be someone you could refer me to. Officially. Another silence. Then, there's an agent I've worked with on fraud cases. Sarah Collins. She's good, thorough, discreet, and she actually cares about the victims. I could pass along her contact information, strictly as a professional referral. That's all I'm asking. But Aunt Jennifer, Emma's voice grew serious. Once you involve immigration, you can't control what happens. If they find enough evidence, they won't just warn Jacob, they'll arrest Mia, prosecute her, potentially deport her. Are you prepared for how Jacob might react to that? The question hung in the air between us. Was I ready to be the person who had my son's girlfriend arrested? Would he ever forgive me? But then I thought of the alternative, watching Jacob marry this woman, seeing his heart broken and his finances ruined when she eventually left him. Sometimes love meant making the hardest choices. Yes, I said firmly. I'm prepared. Send me Sarah Collins' information. 2 days later, I sat across from Agent Collins in her office. Unlike Marcus with his nondescript appearance, Sarah was striking tall, with short dark hair and the confident posture of someone used to command. "Mrs. Brown," she said after I'd explained the situation, "what you're describing is a classic marriage fraud operation. Unfortunately, it's also notoriously difficult to prove before the marriage takes place. But the previous identities, the other marriages, isn't that proof? It's certainly evidence of a pattern," she acknowledged. "And it's definitely enough for us to open an investigation. But to take action before your son's wedding, we'd need something more definitive. Like what? Ideally a confession, or communications between Mia and accomplices discussing the fraud explicitly. The phone conversation you overheard would be perfect if you had recorded it." "I didn't know I needed to," I said, frustration edging my voice. "Of course not." Sarah's expression softened slightly. "Most people don't expect to overhear their future daughter-in-law plotting fraud." "So what can we do?" Sarah considered for a moment. "Mr. Reynolds is continuing his investigation." "Correct." I nodded. "Good. Tell him to focus on finding her real identity and documenting her connection to the previous marriage frauds. Meanwhile, I'll begin an official investigation on our end. If we can establish that Mia Garcia is actually Maria Fuentes or Lucia Vega, we have grounds to question her about immigration fraud. How long will that take? Depends on what we find and how quickly. Weeks, possibly months." "We don't have months," I reminded her. "Jacob is planning to propose at Christmas." Sarah leaned forward. "Mrs. Brown, I understand your urgency, but we have to follow proper procedures. Otherwise, anything we find could be dismissed in immigration court, and she walks free." I left Sarah's office feeling both encouraged and frustrated. The wheels of justice were turning, but would they turn fast enough to prevent Jacob from making the biggest mistake of his life that night? Jacob called with news that made my heart sink. Mom, slight change of plans. Mia's parents can only visit for Thanksgiving weekend. Not mid-November like we thought. Can we do dinner at your place on Thanksgiving Day instead? Thanksgiving, the most important family holiday of the year. And I would be spending it with a woman plotting to defraud my son and two strangers pretending to be her parents. Of course, I said, my mind already calculating how this affected our timeline. Thanksgiving dinner it is. After hanging up, I called Marcus and Sarah to update them on the accelerated schedule. We had less time than we thought. The countdown to Thanksgiving had begun. The first frost of the season had painted my garden in silver when Marcus Reynolds arrived at my home the following Monday. We'd agreed it was safer to meet here rather than in public, less chance of Jacob or Mia spotting us together. Coffee, I offered as I showed him into Robert's study, now serving as our impromptu investigation headquarters. Black, please, Marcus replied, setting his leather portfolio on the desk. He looked tired, with shadows under his eyes suggesting long nights of work. I hope you don't mind meeting here. I found some developments that are better discussed in private. I handed him a steaming mug and settled into Robert's chair. Tell me. I've been doing deep background on our Ms. Garcia, Marcus began, opening his portfolio. What I've found suggests we're dealing with something more organized than a lone operator. He spread several documents across the desk: immigration records, marriage certificates, divorce filings, and printed screenshots of social media accounts. Each featured a different name, but the photos were unmistakably Mia. Maria Fuentes, Las Vegas, 2023, Lucia Vega, Denver, 2021, and now Mia Garcia, Austin, 2025. Marcus pointed to each document in turn. Different names, different cities, but identical tactics. How many men has she done this to? That I can confirm 3 prior to Jacob. There might be more using identities I haven't uncovered yet. I stared at the photographs, bile rising in my throat. The woman smiling beside different men in each picture, all of them looking as besotted as Jacob, wore different hairstyles, different makeup, but the calculating eyes remained the same. The pattern is remarkably consistent, Marcus continued. She targets men with similar profiles, mid-30s to early 40s, tech professionals, financially stable but not flashy rich, recently out of relationships, estranged or distant from family, or with only one living parent, usually a mother. The description hit uncomfortably close to home. Jacob had all these vulnerabilities, and I'd never realized how perfectly they made him a target. She stays with each man for approximately 2 years, Marcus continued. Long enough to secure permanent residency. Then she manufactures relationship problems, files for divorce, and negotiates substantial settlements before disappearing. By the time the men realize what happened, she's already operating under a new identity in a new city. And nobody caught her before now. Immigration fraud is significantly underreported, Marcus explained. Many victims are too embarrassed to come forward. They don't want friends and family knowing they were duped. Plus, by the time they recognize the pattern, she's usually already secured legal status through the marriage. I took a deep breath, trying to process everything. But how does she keep getting new identities, new visas? Wouldn't there be records? That's the concerning part, Marcus said gravely. She's not working alone. The evidence points to a sophisticated operation. Someone provides her with new identities, forged documents, coaching on targets and tactics. Someone helps her move between cities, establish new backgrounds, avoid detection. A criminal organization. More likely a loose network of facilitators who specialize in immigration fraud. These operations function like businesses. They identify vulnerable targets, place operatives in position to establish relationships, provide support and documentation, then take a percentage of whatever assets are acquired in the divorce. I felt sick. So someone is profiting from breaking my son's heart. That's exactly right, and they're very good at covering their tracks. Marcus pulled out a timeline he'd created, mapping Mia's movements over the past 5 years. The precision was chilling. Each identity lasted almost exactly the same amount of time. Each relationship followed the same acceleration toward marriage. Each divorce occurred at the optimal moment for maximum financial gain. What about her supposed parents? I asked, thinking of the upcoming Thanksgiving dinner. Who are they? Almost certainly hired actors, Marcus replied. In previous cases, she brought family members to meet her targets shortly before engagement. Different people each time, but playing the same role: supportive parents, impressed with their daughter's American boyfriend, eager for the marriage to proceed. And they're coming for Thanksgiving, I said, my voice hollow. Which gives us an opportunity, Marcus noted. If they're the same actors she's used before, I might be able to identify them, establish a connection to the larger fraud network. I studied the documents spread before me, a paper trail of broken hearts and stolen futures. What's her real name? Her real nationality? That's still unclear. Based on linguistic analysis of her accent and speech patterns when she's not performing, our language expert believes she's most likely from northern Spain or possibly Venezuela, but her actual identity remains hidden. So what's our next step? Marcus gathered the documents, organizing them methodically. 2 parallel tracks. First, I continue this background investigation hunting for her true identity, documenting her previous frauds in detail, building a case for Agent Collins. Second, we gather real-time evidence recordings of her discussing the fraud with accomplices, for example. But how she's careful, yes, but Thanksgiving gives us an opening. If her parents are part of the fraud network, they'll likely discuss details when they think no one can understand them. He gave me a meaningful look. Your Spanish skills might prove very useful. A plan began forming in my mind, risky, potentially disastrous if discovered, but possibly our best chance to gather irrefutable evidence. I'd need to record their conversations somehow, I said slowly. Marcus nodded. Agent Collins would need legally obtained evidence for an official investigation, but for your purposes, convincing Jacob before he proposes even knowing what they say might be enough. I thought of the upcoming holiday, imagining these strangers in my home, pretending to be family while plotting to destroy my son's life. The violation of it made my chest tight with anger. If they're coming for Thanksgiving, Marcus continued, we have less than 3 weeks to prepare. I suggest you focus on refreshing your Spanish as much as possible. I'll work on identifying the parents from her previous frauds, see if I can predict who might show up. And Agent Collins, I'll update her on what we've found so far. She can start building the official case, but she'll need more concrete evidence before she can intervene. As Marcus packed up his materials, I walked to the window, gazing out at my frost-covered garden. The roses I'd so carefully tended had withered in the cold, a poignant metaphor for what would happen to Jacob's heart if we failed. Mrs. Brown, Marcus said gently, coming to stand beside me. We're going to stop her. We're going to protect your son. I nodded, straightening my shoulders. Yes, we are, because she made one critical mistake. What's that? She thought a 62-year-old Spanish teacher would be too rusty to understand her plotting. I turned to face him, resolve hardening my voice. She has no idea who she's up against. For the next 2 weeks, I devoted myself to preparation. I spent hours each day with an online Spanish tutor, focusing specifically on conversational fluency and regional dialects. I studied Barcelona's geography, customs, and local knowledge details that would help me spot inconsistencies in the stories Mia and her parents might tell. I also made discreet preparations for Thanksgiving dinner, rearranging furniture to create conversation areas where guests might speak privately, planning a menu that would require me to move between kitchen and dining room frequently, giving me opportunities to overhear discussions. 10 days before Thanksgiving, Marcus called with news. I've identified her parents from her previous operation in Denver, he said without preamble. Antonio Vega and Elena Vega, supposedly from Valencia in that incarnation. I've managed to track them to a talent agency in Miami that specializes in event actors people hired to play roles at parties, corporate events, and apparently, immigration fraud schemes. Do you have photos? I asked, hope surging. Better. I have their real names, Thomas Blackwell and Diane Rodriguez, both small-time actors with histories of minor fraud convictions. They specialize in playing foreign relatives for various scams. So they're professionals. Yes, but not particularly good ones. In the Denver case, they made several mistakes that might have exposed the fraud if anyone had been looking closely. Mixed up details about Valencia, mentioned streets that don't exist, that sort of thing. That's helpful, I said, thinking of how I could use this information. If they show up as Mia's parents, we'll have proof of a connection to her previous identity. Exactly. And I've briefed Agent Collins on all of this. She's officially opened an investigation into potential immigration fraud, but she's proceeding carefully. Without concrete evidence of Mia explicitly discussing the fraud, it's still largely circumstantial. What about the previous divorces? The pattern is obvious. Obvious to us, yes. But in court, her attorney could argue they were legitimate relationships that simply didn't work out. We need her on record discussing the fraud. I sighed, frustration building. Thanksgiving is still our best opportunity. Yes, Marcus agreed. If her parents are the same actors, and if you can get them talking freely in Spanish, we might get what we need. 3 days before Thanksgiving, Jacob called to confirm final arrangements. Mia's parents' flight gets in Wednesday evening, he said, excitement evident in his voice. We'll bring them over around 2 on Thursday. If that works, Mia says her mom wants to bring a traditional Spanish dessert. That sounds perfect, I replied, keeping my tone warm and interested. I can't wait to meet them. They're great. Mom, really traditional, kind of formal, but really supportive of Mia. Her dad was a high school history teacher for 30 years. Every detail added to the fiction, making the eventual revelation more painful. I swallowed hard against the lump in my throat. Wonderful. I'll make sure everything's perfect for them. After hanging up, I texted Emma, actors arriving Wednesday, dinner Thursday, wish me luck. Her reply came quickly. Be careful. Don't take unnecessary risks. Remember, we need legally obtained evidence. Thanksgiving morning dawned clear and cold. I'd been up since 5, preparing the turkey, chopping vegetables, and moving through the familiar rhythms of holiday cooking with a sense of surreal detachment. This wasn't just a family celebration. It was a covert operation. At precisely 2 p.m., the doorbell rang. I smoothed my dress, took a steadying breath, and opened the door to greet the people plotting to defraud my son. Mrs. Brown, Mia said, looking elegant in a burgundy dress. I would like you to introduce you to my parents, Antonio and Elena Garcia. Antonio stepped forward with old-world courtesy, taking my hand and kissing it lightly. Senora Brown, we are so honored to meet the mother of the man who has captured our daughter's heart. His accent was perfect, his mannerisms exactly what you'd expect from a retired teacher from Barcelona. Elena embraced me warmly, smelling of expensive perfume and speaking in rapid, enthusiastic Spanish about how wonderful it was to finally meet me. They were good professional level good, but as I listened carefully to their Spanish, I detected something off in their accents. The vowels were slightly wrong, the cadence not quite matching Barcelona's distinctive patterns. Instead, they sounded more like Madrid natives trying to approximate Catalan-influenced Spanish. Please come in, I said in my deliberately rusty Spanish. I apologize for my poor pronunciation. It's been many years since I spoke your beautiful language. The effect was immediate and telling. Mia's eyes flickered with something that might have been concern, while her fake parents exchanged the briefest of glances. They hadn't expected me to speak Spanish at all. Jacob arrived from parking the car, bringing wine and a bouquet of flowers. Aren't they wonderful? Mom? He asked, his face alight with happiness. Absolutely charming, I agreed, leading everyone to the living room where appetizers awaited. As we settled in with drinks, I carefully steered the conversation toward Barcelona, asking innocent questions about neighborhoods and landmarks, watching for any hesitation or confusion in their responses. The Barri Gothic is our favorite area, Elena said smoothly. So much history, so much character. And La Rambla, Antonio added. Though it's become very touristic now. They'd done their homework, at least with the major landmarks, but when I mentioned a smaller neighborhood market I'd visited during my time in Spain, Antonio's eyes showed momentary panic before Mia smoothly intervened. Papa doesn't go to that market often, she explained. It's closer to my mother's work. Throughout appetizers, I maintained my role as the charmed mother-in-law, expressing delight at finally meeting Mia's family, asking gentle questions about their life in Spain, and pretending not to notice the calculated glances they exchanged when discussing certain topics. When I excused myself to check on the turkey, Elena offered to help. Perhaps I can assist with the gravy in Spain. We have a similar tradition with our holiday roasts. In the kitchen, she chatted amiably about Spanish cooking while I basted the turkey. Her knowledge seemed genuine enough, but when she thought I wasn't paying attention, I caught her sending a text message, angling her phone away from my view. Everything okay? I asked innocently. Oh, yes, she replied, quickly pocketing her phone. Just checking on our hotel reservation. There was a small problem with the room. Back in the living room, Antonio was regaling Jacob with stories about teaching history to reluctant teenagers, stories that sounded remarkably similar to ones I'd told about my own teaching career, as if he'd borrowed my experiences and relocated them to Spain. Jacob tells me you were a Spanish teacher, Antonio said as I rejoined them. What a wonderful coincidence. We must compare notes on education in our countries. I'd love that, I replied, watching his face closely. I spent some time in Madrid before teaching, but never made it to Barcelona except for brief visits. Madrid, a beautiful city, he said with practiced enthusiasm. Though, of course, not as beautiful as Barcelona. The pattern continued through dinner, carefully crafted stories, rehearsed answers about Barcelona, and a remarkable ability to redirect any question that might expose gaps in their knowledge. They were good, but not flawless. Small inconsistencies emerged. Elena mentioned a street that didn't connect to the neighborhood they claimed to live in. Antonio described a school tradition that belonged to Madrid, not Barcelona. Most telling of all, when they spoke to each other in Spanish, thinking I couldn't follow their casual conversation, they revealed knowledge and references that belonged to Madrid, not Barcelona. "Pass the salt, would you?" Elena said in Spanish to Antonio. "This American food is so bland." "At least the wine is decent," he replied, also in Spanish. "Though I miss proper Spanish cheese, these Americans have no palate." Meanwhile, in English, they were praising my cooking and expressing delight at experiencing authentic American Thanksgiving hospitality. I maintained my pleasant facade, pretending not to understand their asides while mentally cataloging each slip, each inconsistency, each moment of casual disdain. The moment that confirmed everything came during dessert. Jacob had stepped into the kitchen to help me serve coffee when Mia spoke quietly to her fake parents in rapid Spanish. "She's harmless but not stupid. Keep the details consistent and don't get too comfortable. We're almost at the finish line." "The son is completely hooked," Antonio replied. "When do you want to do the proposal timeline? Christmas Eve engagement, New Year's wedding?" Mia answered confidently. "Emotional timing that makes it hard for anyone to object." Elena nodded approvingly. "Perfect. The faster the marriage, the smoother the process. The lawyer has all the immigration paperwork prepared." My hands trembled slightly as I arranged coffee cups on a tray, but years of classroom management had taught me how to control my expressions. They thought they were speaking privately. They thought their secret was safe. They had no idea that the harmless American widow serving them pumpkin pie and coffee understood every calculated word. As the evening wound down and they prepared to leave, Elena took my hands warmly. "We are so grateful that our Mia found Jacob, and through him, family is everything. Don't you agree?" "Oh, absolutely," I said, smiling serenely. "Family is the most important thing in the world. We'd do anything to protect the people we love." After they left, Jacob lingered, helping me clean up and bubbling over with excitement about his future in-laws. "They're amazing, aren't they? So warm and genuine. I can see where Mia gets her character." "They're certainly impressive," I agreed, carefully choosing my words. "Very polished." "I'm thinking about proposing next week," he said, his voice soft with nervous excitement. "Not waiting until Christmas Eve like I planned. Maybe at the lake where we had our first date. What do you think?" I turned away, ostensibly to load the dishwasher, but really to hide the expression on my face. "I think that sounds very romantic, sweetheart." What I was really thinking was that Mia Garcia had just made her second crucial mistake. The first was underestimating me. The second was revealing her timeline while I was still in a position to destroy it. I hugged Jacob goodbye at the door, my heart aching with the knowledge of what was coming. "I love you, Jacob. No matter what happens, please remember that." He looked puzzled. "Of course, Mom. I love you too. Is everything okay?" "Everything's fine," I assured him. "Just feeling a bit emotional about all these changes. It's been a lovely Thanksgiving." As his car disappeared down the street, I immediately called Marcus. They were here, the same actors from Denver, and I heard everything. The morning after Thanksgiving, I sat in Marcus Reynolds' office, recounting every detail of the dinner conversation while he took meticulous notes. Agent Sarah Collins sat across from me, her expression growing more serious with each revelation. "So they explicitly discussed the timeline for marriage and immigration?" she asked, looking up from her notebook. "Yes," I confirmed. "Christmas Eve proposal, New Year's wedding. Mia said it was emotional timing that makes it hard for anyone to object. And the mother mentioned a lawyer having immigration paperwork ready. Exactly those words. In Spanish, assuming I wouldn't understand." Agent Collins exchanged a glance with Marcus. "This is significant. We now have eyewitness testimony of conspiracy to commit immigration fraud, combined with the evidence of her previous identities and the connection to known fraud facilitators. We have enough to escalate the investigation." "Does that mean you can stop her?" I asked, hope rising in my chest. "Not immediately," she cautioned. "Your testimony is valuable, but for court-admissible evidence, we'd need recordings or documentation. Without that, it's still your word against theirs." My heart sank. "But Jacob is planning to propose next week, not even waiting until Christmas Eve like they discussed." "Which actually works in our favor," Marcus interjected. "It disrupts their careful timeline. They won't be prepared. Agent Collins nodded thoughtfully. This gives us an opportunity. If we can document one more explicit conversation about the fraud, ideally with Mia herself, clearly discussing her intentions, we'd have enough for an arrest. But how, I asked. She's careful about where and when she discusses the fraud. Not careful enough, Marcus pointed out. She spoke openly at your house, assuming you couldn't understand Spanish. She might do it again if given the opportunity. A plan began forming. I would invite Jacob and Mia for dinner again, creating another opportunity to overhear her conversations. This time, with proper equipment in place to record everything legally. Agent Collins outlined the legal requirements carefully. In Texas, it's legal to record a conversation as long as one party to the conversation consents. As the homeowner, you can legally record conversations in your own home. But we need to be precise about this. The recording devices need to be in common areas where there's no expectation of privacy. We spent the next hour strategizing placement of recording devices, conversation topics most likely to provoke revealing statements, and the timing of the dinner. We settled on the coming Sunday just days before Jacob planned to propose. Marcus would provide and install the recording equipment, disguised as ordinary household items. Agent Collins would remain on standby, ready to review any evidence we captured. But as I prepared to leave, Agent Collins stopped me with a gentle hand on my arm. Mrs. Brown, there's something else you should know. Her expression had softened, which somehow made me more nervous. What is it? In the course of our investigation, we've uncovered some disturbing information about Mia's previous victims. She pulled a file from her briefcase and opened it carefully. The psychological and financial damage has been significant. I steeled myself as she showed me statements from previous victims, men like Jacob, who had fallen completely for Mia's performance, only to be systematically destroyed when she was done with them. Richard Donovan, Las Vegas. I lost my home, my savings, and my ability to trust. 3 years later, I'm still in therapy, still trying to understand how I missed the signs. Michael Pearson, Denver. She took everything, not just my money, but my self-worth, my confidence. I haven't dated since. I can't risk being that wrong about someone again. And most disturbing of all, David Chen, San Diego. After she left, I couldn't see a future anymore. I attempted suicide. If my brother hadn't found me, I'm still rebuilding my life, one day at a time. I felt physically ill reading their statements, imagining Jacob in the same position, broken, betrayed, possibly suicidal. The stakes weren't just financial, they were potentially life-threatening. I'm showing you this, Agent Collins said gently, because you need to understand what we're preventing. Your son isn't just facing a bad marriage or financial loss. These operations are designed to extract maximum emotional and financial damage. The psychological toll is deliberate. A devastated victim is less likely to fight back, less likely to report the crime. I understand, I said, my resolve hardening. Whatever it takes, we stop her before she can hurt Jacob. That evening, I called Jacob to invite him and Mia to Sunday dinner. Just something simple, I said casually. I have some of your father's special wine I've been saving for a special occasion, and after meeting Mia's parents, this feels like the right time. That sounds great, Mom, Jacob replied, clearly pleased. I'll check with Mia, but I'm sure we can come. After confirming plans, I spent the next 2 days in careful preparation. Marcus arrived Sunday morning to install the recording equipment, small, powerful devices hidden in ordinary objects throughout my living room and kitchen, a decorative clock, a tissue box, a picture frame, all now capable of capturing high-quality audio. Remember, Marcus cautioned as he tested the equipment, the goal is to get her talking about the fraud explicitly. Questions about the wedding timeline, immigration paperwork, her parents, anything that might prompt her to reveal her true intentions. What if she's too careful? I asked, nervous now that the moment was approaching. We have enough to build a case already, he reassured me. This would simply strengthen it. And remember, I'll be monitoring everything from my car outside. If there's any clear evidence of fraud, I'll alert Agent Collins immediately. By 6 o'clock, my home was ready, dinner prepared, wine decanted, recording devices active but invisible, and Marcus stationed discreetly in a car down the street, monitoring everything through the wireless connection. Jacob arrived first, kissing my cheek as he handed me flowers. Mia's running a bit late, he explained. Work call with her hotel. She said to start without her if she's more than 20 minutes late. No rush, I said, taking the flowers. Let's have a glass of your father's wine while we wait. We settled in the living room, Jacob practically vibrating with excitement. I found the perfect ring. Mom, vintage, like you suggested. Reminds me of the one Dad gave you. Actually, my heart ached at the thought of Robert's carefully chosen ring on the finger of a con artist. That's lovely, sweetheart. I'm planning to propose at the lake on Tuesday evening, he continued. Sunset, champagne, the works. I've never been more sure of anything. I forced a smile. It's a big step. I know it seems fast, he acknowledged. But when you know, you know. Dad proposed to you after 6 months, right? He did, I admitted. But we'd known each other for years before dating. Jacob waved this away. Different times. Anyway, wait until you see the ring. I brought it to show you. He pulled a small velvet box from his pocket and opened it to reveal a beautiful vintage diamond ring with sapphire accents. My breath caught. It was indeed remarkably similar to my own engagement ring, which I still wore on my right hand after moving it from my left following Robert's death. It's beautiful, I said honestly. Any woman would be thrilled to receive it. The doorbell rang, saving me from having to say more. Jacob quickly pocketed the ring box as I went to answer it. Mia stood on my doorstep, looking immaculate as always in a deep green dress that complemented her olive complexion. Jennifer, I'm so sorry I'm late. The call with Barcelona went longer than expected. No problem at all, I assured her, welcoming her inside. Jacob and I were just catching up. I hope I'm not interrupting, she said with a warm smile. Mother-son time is so important. Every word, every gesture seemed designed to portray the perfect, considerate girlfriend. If I hadn't heard her true intentions from her own lips, I might have been completely taken in. Over dinner, I carefully guided the conversation toward topics that might prompt revealing responses: the wedding timeline, her parents' visit, their future plans. Jacob, oblivious to my agenda, happily discussed possible wedding dates while Mia offered thoughtful, measured responses that revealed nothing incriminating. Your parents seemed very excited about you two getting married, I observed casually. Have they always been so supportive of your relationships? A flicker of something caution perhaps crossed Mia's face before her smile returned. They have always wanted what makes me happy, and Jacob makes me very happy. They mentioned returning for the wedding, I continued. Will other family members come as well, siblings, cousins? Perhaps, she said vaguely. Travel from Spain is expensive, and many of my relatives cannot easily take time away from work. After dinner, I suggested Jacob open another bottle of his father's wine from the cellar. It needs to breathe a bit before serving, I explained. Mia and I can clear the table while you do that. As soon as Jacob disappeared downstairs, I began clearing plates, watching Mia carefully from the corner of my eye. As expected, her phone buzzed with a message. She checked it quickly, then excused herself. Do you mind if I take this call? It's my mother checking in. Of course not, I said warmly. Take it in the living room. More comfortable there. She stepped into the living room, closing the sliding door partway for privacy, but not completely, another calculated move to appear considerate while maintaining secrets. From the kitchen, I could hear her speaking rapid Spanish, her voice low but clear enough for the hidden recording devices. Yes, everything is proceeding as planned, she was saying. The mother suspects nothing. The son plans to propose Tuesday. I continued loading the dishwasher, straining to hear every word. No, earlier than we discussed, but it's fine. Better, actually. Less time for anyone to interfere. She paused, listening. The lawyer says the prenuptial agreement shouldn't be an issue. His assets are modest but sufficient, and the real target is the mother's inheritance. Once we're married, I can start working on getting access to those funds. My hands trembled with anger as I carefully placed wine glasses in the rack. Not only was she planning to defraud Jacob, but she was already calculating how to access my estate as well. 2 years maximum, she continued, echoing what she'd said during our first meeting. I'll secure permanent residency, then the divorce. The usual settlement should yield at least $500,000 plus whatever I can access of the family assets before then. The casual way she discussed destroying my son's life for profit made me physically ill, but I forced myself to continue working quietly, not alerting her to the fact that I could hear every word. No, the parents were perfect. No one questioned them. The mother speaks a little Spanish, but nothing concerning. She laughed softly. Americans are so trusting. They want to believe in love stories. I heard footsteps on the cellar stairs and quickly moved to the sink, turning on the water to create ambient noise as Jacob returned with the wine. Mia smoothly switched to English, ending her call with, "Love you too, Mama." Yes, I'll tell them. Goodbye. Jacob entered the kitchen, wine bottle in hand. Found it Dad's special vintage. Mia rejoined us, Her transition from calculating con artist to loving girlfriend seamless. Your mother was just telling me about your childhood home. It sounds wonderful. The rest of the evening proceeded normally: wine, dessert, pleasant conversation about nothing consequential. I maintained my role as the charmed future mother-in-law while silently counting the minutes until they would leave and I could contact Marcus and Agent Collins. As they were preparing to go, Mia embraced me warmly. Thank you for such a lovely evening. Jennifer, these family dinners mean so much to me, being so far from my own parents. The performance was flawless, the grateful immigrant finding family in America, the loving girlfriend appreciating her boyfriend's mother. If I hadn't heard her calculating my net worth 20 minutes earlier, I might have been moved. I hugged Jacob tightly at the door, wanting to blurt out everything, to stop him from walking away with the woman who planned to destroy him. But I held my tongue, trusting the plan. Love you, Mom, he said, kissing my cheek. See you soon. Love you too, sweetheart. More than you know. As their car pulled away, I immediately texted Marcus. Got it. Everything we needed. Call Collins now. Marcus arrived at my house 20 minutes later, Agent Collins following close behind. They moved with the efficient urgency of people who knew time was critical. The recordings are excellent, Marcus confirmed, setting up his laptop on my dining table. Clear, explicit discussions of fraud, timeline, financial targets, everything we needed. Agent Collins nodded as she listened to the audio files. This is exactly what we've been waiting for, combined with the evidence of her previous identities and the actors playing her parents. We have more than enough for an arrest warrant. So you can stop her? I asked, hardly daring to hope. Before she marries my son? Yes, Agent Collins confirmed. But we need to move carefully. Immigration fraud cases are complex, and we want this one to be airtight. Jacob is proposing Tuesday evening, I reminded them. That's less than 48 hours from now. We'll be ready before then, Agent Collins assured me. I'm going to bring this recording to my supervisor immediately and request an expedited warrant. With luck, we'll be able to make the arrest tomorrow. And if we can't get the warrant in time, I asked, fear creeping back. Then we move to Plan B, Marcus said grimly. Direct intervention. We show Jacob the evidence ourselves before he can propose. The thought made my stomach clench. He'll be devastated either way. Yes, Agent Collins said gently, but it's better to be devastated before the marriage than after, when the financial and legal entanglements would be much harder to unravel. They departed shortly after midnight, Agent Collins heading directly to her office to begin processing the warrant request, Marcus promising to return first thing in the morning with updates. I barely slept that night, my mind replaying Mia's cold calculations about my son's assets, my inheritance, the 2-year timeline for destroying his life. Dawn found me at the kitchen table, nursing my 3rd cup of coffee, waiting for news. Marcus called at 8:17 a.m. We have the warrant. Agent Collins is assembling her team now. They plan to make the arrest this afternoon. Relief washed over me. Where how? At Mia's apartment. Clean, simple, away from Jacob. They'll bring her in for questioning, confront her with the evidence, and offer her a choice: cooperate with the investigation into the larger fraud network or face maximum charges. What about Jacob? The most important question. Marcus hesitated. That's more complicated. Agent Collins believes it's better if law enforcement explains the situation to him, presents the evidence officially. It's less likely he'll dismiss it as a misunderstanding or a mistake. I should be there, I insisted. He'll need me. Of course, Marcus agreed. But let Agent Collins lead the conversation. This is going to be hard enough for him without feeling like his mother orchestrated it all. The plan was set. At 2 p.m., immigration agents would arrest Mia at her apartment. At 3 p.m., Agent Collins would meet Jacob at his office, explain the situation, and bring him to my house where I would be waiting with Marcus and the evidence. I spent the morning in a state of anxious anticipation, alternating between relief that the fraud would be stopped and dread about how Jacob would take the news. Would he blame me for not telling him sooner? Would he believe the evidence? Or would his love for Mia blind him to her true nature? At precisely 2:05 p.m., my phone rang. Agent Collins' name flashed on the screen. We have a problem, she said without preamble. Mia's not at her apartment. According to her neighbors, she left early this morning with luggage. My blood ran cold. She's running. It looks that way. We're checking airports, bus stations, and car rental agencies now, and we've put an alert on her passport and known aliases. Jacob, I said, panic rising. Has anyone contacted Jacob? Not yet. We wanted to apprehend her first. Avoid tipping our hand. Agent Collins' voice was professionally calm but tinged with concern. Do you know where he is right now? I tried to think through my fear. At work, probably. He usually leaves the office around 5. I'm sending officers to his workplace now, and I'm heading to your house. Stay put. Don't try to contact him yet if Mia is with him. We don't want to alert her. The next 2 hours were the longest of my life. I paced my living room, jumping at every sound, checking my phone every few minutes for updates. What if Mia had convinced Jacob to elope? What if she'd already accessed his accounts, emptied them before disappearing? At 3:47 p.m., cars pulled into my driveway, Agent Collins' government sedan followed by a police cruiser. I rushed to the door, heart in my throat. Agent Collins approached quickly. We haven't found her yet, but officers have located Jacob. He's safe, still at work. They're bringing him here now. Thank God, I breathed. Does he know what's happening? They told him there's a security concern involving his girlfriend, and that they need to speak with him urgently. Nothing more specific yet. We settled in the living room to wait, Agent Collins checking in with her team by phone every few minutes. 20 excruciating minutes later, another car pulled up, and I saw Jacob step out, escorted by 2 officers in plain clothes. His expression was confused and increasingly concerned. I met him at the door, pulling him into a tight hug before he could speak. Jacob, sweetheart, come inside. There's something important we need to discuss. Mom, what's going on? He looked around at the officers, Agent Collins and Marcus, alarm growing in his eyes. They said something about Mia being in danger. Is she okay? Agent Collins stepped forward, her manner professional but gentle. Mr. Brown, I'm Special Agent Sarah Collins with Immigration and Customs Enforcement. Please, sit down. This is difficult, but we have reason to believe that the woman you know as Mia Garcia is involved in immigration fraud. Jacob stared at her blankly. That's crazy. There must be some mistake. I wish there was, I said softly. But there isn't. We have evidence. Jacob, solid evidence. For the next hour, Agent Collins and Marcus methodically presented the case against Mia, her previous identities as Maria Fuentes and Lucia Vega, her pattern of marriage fraud with other men, the actors hired to play her parents, and finally, the recordings of her discussing the fraud explicitly. Jacob sat motionless, his face draining of color as the evidence mounted. When they played the recording from Sunday night, Mia's voice clearly discussing her plans to divorce him, after securing residency and assets, he covered his face with his hands. This can't be real, he whispered. She loves me. I know she does. Jacob, I said gently, moving to sit beside him. I heard her myself. That first night she came to dinner. She was on the phone, speaking Spanish, explaining how she was going to manipulate you into marriage and then divorce you for money and citizenship. I heard everything. He looked up sharply. You knew you've known all this time and you didn't tell me? The accusation in his voice cut deep, but I'd expected it. I knew you wouldn't believe me without proof. I needed evidence you couldn't dismiss. So instead you investigated my girlfriend behind my back. His voice cracked with pain. Had her followed, recorded her conversations, got the federal government involved. Agent Collins intervened. Mr. Brown, your mother was protecting you from a sophisticated criminal operation. Mia Garcia, or whatever her real name is, has done this before, multiple times. She's destroyed men's lives, taken their money, broken their hearts, and moved on to the next target. I don't believe it, Jacob insisted, but his voice lacked conviction now. There has to be an explanation. Marcus pulled out his laptop. Perhaps seeing her with her other husbands might help. He brought up photos of Mia with her previous victims' wedding photos, vacation snapshots, all showing the same woman with different men, different names, but the same calculating smile. Jacob stared at the images, the last of his denial crumbling. The ring, he said suddenly, pulling the velvet box from his pocket. I was going to give her my grandmother's ring tomorrow. The thought of our family heirloom on the finger of a woman who saw Jacob as nothing more than a meal ticket made me physically ill. Oh, Jacob. She would have worn it, he said hollowly, taken it with her when she divorced me. Grandmother's ring would have ended up in some pawn shop. Agent Collins received a text and stepped aside to take a call. When she returned, her expression was grim. We have a problem. Our agents at the airport have confirmed that Mia Garcia traveling under yet another alias we weren't aware of. Sofia Mendez boarded a flight to Madrid 3 hours ago. She's gone. Jacob sat motionless on my living room sofa, staring at the small velvet ring box in his hands. The news that Mia had fled the country seemed to have drained the last of his resistance. "She's gone," he said flatly. "She just left, without a word." Agent Collins sat across from him, her expression compassionate but professional. This is unfortunately consistent with her pattern. When she senses exposure, she abandons the operation and moves on to a new identity, a new target. "Operation," Jacob repeated, the word hollow in his mouth. "That's all I was to her. An operation." I moved to sit beside him, placing my hand gently on his arm. "Jacob, I'm so sorry." He didn't pull away, but he didn't look at me either. "How long have you known about all of this?" "Since that first dinner," I admitted. "When she spoke Spanish on the phone, thinking I wouldn't understand. That was over a month ago." His voice held no accusation now, just a dull realization. "You've been investigating her all this time." "I knew you wouldn't believe me without proof," I explained softly. "You were so in love with her. If I'd just told you what I'd heard, you would have thought I was jealous or interfering." "You're right." A bitter smile twisted his lips. "I wouldn't have believed you. I would have chosen her." The admission hung in the air between us, painful in its honesty. Agent Collins cleared her throat gently. "Mr. Brown, we'll need a formal statement from you about your relationship with Mia Garcia. Any information you can provide might help us track her movements and potentially identify other victims." Jacob nodded mechanically. "Whatever you need, though I'm not sure how much help I'll be. Apparently, I didn't know her at all." "That's not true," Marcus interjected kindly. "You knew the person she pretended to be. The fraud was designed to be convincing. She studied you, learned your preferences, your history, your vulnerabilities. Then she became exactly what you wanted." "Professional-level manipulation," Agent Collins added. "These operations are sophisticated and targeted. The victims are chosen precisely because they're intelligent, successful, and trusting. You're not the first to be deceived. And unfortunately, you won't be the last." Jacob ran his hands through his hair, a gesture of frustration I'd recognized since his childhood. "What happens now?" "We'll continue pursuing her," Agent Collins explained. "Interpol has been notified. We flagged all her known aliases. If she attempts to enter the U.S. again or targets another American citizen abroad, we'll know. But she'll probably get away with it," Jacob concluded bitterly. "Find another name, another country, another victim." "For now, perhaps," Agent Collins conceded. "But people like this eventually make mistakes. The more we know about her methods, her contacts, her network, the closer we get to shutting down the entire operation." Jacob stood abruptly. "I need some air." I rose to follow him, but Marcus placed a gentle hand on my shoulder. "Give him space," he advised quietly. "This is a lot to process." Through the window, I watched my son pace the length of the garden, his shoulders hunched against more than just the December chill. The ring box was still clutched in his hand, a painful reminder of dreams now shattered. "What do I do now?" I asked softly, more to myself than to the others. "Be there for him," Agent Collins said simply. "But don't expect him to thank you right away. Finding out you've been deceived by someone you love is traumatic. Finding out your mother knew and was investigating behind your back, that's complicated. I was trying to protect him." "And you did," she assured me. "But protection sometimes comes at a cost." Over the next few hours, Jacob gave his statement, answering questions about Mia's habits, her contacts, her possessions, anything that might help authorities track her movements. His voice remained steady, almost clinical, as he dissected the relationship that had meant everything to him just hours earlier. When the agents finally departed, promising to keep us updated on the investigation, Jacob remained in the garden. I brought him a blanket and a mug of hot chocolate, setting them on the bench beside him without a word. "I was going to propose tomorrow," he said without looking up. "At sunset, by the lake where we had our first date." I sat beside him, leaving space between us. "I know, sweetheart. I had it all planned. Champagne, music, flowers." He finally looked at me, his eyes red-rimmed. "I thought she was the one. Mom. I really did." "I know," I repeated, my heart breaking for him. "The thing is," he continued, his voice cracking, "part of me still wants to believe there's an explanation, that it's all some huge misunderstanding, that she really did love me." "That's natural," I said carefully. "The heart doesn't catch up to the head immediately. But you never believed in her, did you not for a minute?" I considered lying, softening the truth to spare his feelings, but we'd had enough lies. No, I admitted, not after I heard what she said that first night. But Jacob, I wanted to be wrong. I prayed I was wrong. He nodded slowly. I understand why you did what you did. Going to Emma, hiring Marcus, the recordings, all of it. But it still hurts that you didn't just tell me. Would you have listened? A long pause. No. Probably not. He slipped the ring box into his pocket. I should go home. Try to. I don't even know. Start picking up the pieces. I guess. Stay here tonight, I urged. The guest room is made up. You shouldn't be alone right now. To my surprise, he agreed. Okay, just tonight. That night, as snow began to fall outside, I heard Jacob moving restlessly around the guest room. The floorboards creaked with his pacing, a rhythmic accompaniment to what I imagined was the endless replay of every moment with Mia, now re-examined through the lens of betrayal. Around 2 a.m., I gave up on sleep and made my way to the kitchen to brew chamomile tea. I found Jacob already there, sitting at the counter, staring at his phone. Can't sleep, I asked unnecessarily. She's deleted everything, he said, showing me his phone. All her social media accounts, gone. Her phone number, disconnected. It's like she never existed. I set the kettle on the stove. In a way, she didn't. Mia Garcia was a creation, a character played by someone whose real name we don't even know. I keep thinking about her parents, the actors, how convincing they were, how they talked about Barcelona, about their lives there. It was all so detailed, so specific. Professional con artists, I reminded him gently. That's their job, creating fictional lives people want to believe in. Jacob set his phone down. You know what the worst part is? I'm not even special. I'm just the latest in a line of men she's targeted. A mark, a victim. You're not a victim, I said firmly. You're a survivor. There's a difference. Doesn't feel like it right now. I placed a mug of tea in front of him. It will. Not today, not tomorrow, but eventually. We sat in companionable silence, watching the snow fall outside the kitchen window. After a while, Jacob spoke again, his voice softer. Thank you, Mom, for saving me from making the biggest mistake of my life. That's what mothers do, I replied simply. We protect our children, even when it's hard, even when they might hate us for it. I don't hate you, he assured me. I'm complicated right now, but not that. It wasn't forgiveness, not completely, but it was a start. The weeks following Mia's disappearance were difficult. Jacob threw himself into work, avoiding social situations and dodging questions about his mysterious Spanish girlfriend who had seemingly vanished overnight. I gave him space, calling regularly but not pushing, being available without hovering. Christmas came and went, a subdued affair at my house with just Jacob and my sister's family. Emma's presence was particularly helpful. Her professional knowledge and matter-of-fact approach to the situation provided Jacob with perspective that I, as his mother, couldn't offer. You're not alone in this, she told him over Christmas dinner. Immigration fraud through marriage affects thousands of Americans every year. Most cases never even get investigated. Lucky me, Jacob replied with a hint of his old sarcasm. I got the full federal investigation. You did, Emma agreed. Because your mother refused to let you become just another statistic. Jacob's eyes met mine across the table. I know, he said quietly. I'm starting to understand what that took. Agent Collins called periodically with updates. Interpol had traced Mia to Madrid but lost her trail after that. They'd identified the organization behind her operation, a loose network of immigration fraud facilitators operating throughout Europe and North America. Several arrests had been made in Miami, including Thomas Blackwell and Diane Rodriguez, the actors who had played Mia's parents. They're cooperating with authorities, Collins informed us in January, providing information about the network in exchange for reduced sentences. Will that help find Mia? Jacob asked, now fully invested in seeing justice done. Possibly. They knew her as Alicia Ramirez, but that's likely just another alias. The real breakthrough would be identifying her handler, the person who selects targets, creates the identities, manages the logistics. By February, Jacob had started therapy with a counselor specializing in relationship fraud trauma. The sessions were helping him work through not just the betrayal by Mia, but the pattern of choosing partners who took advantage of his trusting nature. Dr. Winters says I have a rescuer complex, he told me during Sunday lunch at my house, now a regular ritual again. I'm attracted to people who seem to need saving. Your father had a bit of that too, I admitted. It's not a bad quality. Jacob, compassion is beautiful. It just needs to be balanced with discernment. That's what I'm working on, he said, spearing a piece of broccoli with his fork. Learning to spot the difference between someone who genuinely needs support and someone who's manufacturing vulnerability to manipulate me. His progress was evident, gradual but steady. The hollow look in his eyes had faded. He smiled more, even laughed occasionally. The wound was healing, though I suspected the scar would remain. One rainy March afternoon, Agent Collins called with unexpected news. We found her, Mrs. Brown, or rather, we found the real her. You caught Mia? I asked, heart racing. No, not exactly. We identified who Mia Garcia really is, her actual identity. I sat down, somehow knowing this was important. Who is she? Her real name is Alicia Navarro. She's 32 years old, born in Madrid but raised in Venezuela. She's been involved in various fraud schemes since her early 20s: credit card scams, investment fraud, and for the past 6 years, marriage fraud. Have you arrested her? Not yet. She's still in the wind. But now that we know her true identity, we've uncovered something else, something unexpected. Agent Collins paused, and I could hear papers rustling. Mrs. Brown, the real Mia Garcia exists. She's 29, lives in Barcelona with her parents, works in hotel management, just like Alicia claimed. I felt a chill run down my spine. What are you saying? Alicia didn't just create a fictional persona. She stole the identity of a real woman. She studied Mia Garcia's life through social media for months, built her cover story around Mia's actual experiences. We've made contact with the real Mia, and she had no idea her identity was being used for fraud in America. That poor woman, I murmured. It's worse than that, Collins continued. Because of Alicia's activities using her name, the real Mia Garcia has had her bank accounts frozen pending investigation. Her reputation in her community has been damaged by association with international fraud, and she's facing serious financial difficulties. Her mother is battling cancer, and the medical bills are crippling the family. I closed my eyes, absorbing the ripple effect of Alicia's crimes, how her deception had harmed not just Jacob, but an innocent woman an ocean away. Is there anything we can do? I asked. Actually, yes, Collins replied. We're building a case against Alicia Navarro, and testimony from both Jacob and the real Mia Garcia would strengthen it considerably. We're exploring bringing Miss B. Garcia to the United States to provide an official statement. But if she's struggling financially, that's why I'm calling. The department has limited resources for witness travel. If there were a private citizen willing to help fund Miss B. Garcia's trip, I'll do it, I said immediately. Whatever she needs. 2 weeks later, I stood in the International Arrivals Terminal at Austin Bergstrom Airport, holding a sign with Mia Garcia written in my best handwriting. The irony wasn't lost on me, waiting to meet the real version of the woman whose false version had nearly destroyed my son. When she emerged from customs, I recognized her immediately from the photos Agent Collins had shared. She looked remarkably like Alicia's portrayal, petite, dark-haired, with an elegance that seemed effortless. But where Alicia's eyes had held calculation beneath their warmth, this woman's gaze was open, a little nervous, and genuinely kind. Mrs. Brown? She asked in accented English, approaching cautiously. I am Mia, the real one. I think... I couldn't help smiling. Yes, you're definitely the real one. Thank you for coming. The real Mia Garcia settled into the guest room at my house, initially shy but quickly warming to me. Over morning coffee the day after her arrival, she shared her shock at discovering her identity had been stolen. The police came to my apartment in Barcelona, she explained. Her English good but more heavily accented than Alicia's had been. They asked about an American fiancé I did not have. They showed me pictures of this woman using my name, my history. It was like seeing a ghost version of myself. I can't imagine how violating that must have felt, I said, pouring her more coffee. It was terrifying, Mia admitted. Suddenly my bank accounts were frozen. My neighbors looked at me differently. My boss at the hotel questioned me. All because this woman Alicia decided to become me. How did she get your information? Social media, mostly? I am not very private online. I post about my work, my family, my travels. She studied everything: where I went to school, which hotels I worked at, even my favorite books and foods. Mia shook her head in disbelief. She created a perfect copy of my life, then used it to hurt people. Including you, I noted. Yes, the timing was especially cruel. My mother's cancer treatments are expensive. With my accounts frozen and my reputation damaged, I couldn't help my parents when they needed me most. I reached across the table to squeeze her hand. I'm truly sorry. For all of it. It is not your fault, she said kindly. You and your son are victims too. Speaking of Jacob, I'd been hesitant to tell him about Mia's arrival. Agent Collins had suggested giving him the choice of whether to meet her, understanding how emotionally complicated it might be to face the real version of the woman whose false version he'd fallen in love with. I called him last night, I told Mia. Explained who you are and why you're here. He'd like to meet you, if you're comfortable with that. Of course, she agreed readily. Perhaps it will help both of us to talk to understand what happened from each other's perspective. They arranged to meet at a neutral location, the coffee shop where Jacob had first encountered Alicia. I offered to accompany Mia, but she politely declined. I think this is something we should do alone, she said. Two people connected by someone who hurt us both. I watched her leave for the meeting, struck by the surreal nature of the situation. The real Mia Garcia was walking into a coffee shop to meet the man who had nearly married her imposter. What could they possibly say to each other? 3 hours later, far longer than I'd expected, Jacob's car pulled into my driveway with Mia in the passenger seat. Through the window, I saw them talking animatedly, Jacob gesturing with a freedom I hadn't seen since before Alicia's deception was revealed. They came in together, Jacob holding the door for her with natural courtesy, not the exaggerated gallantry he'd shown with Alicia. "Mom," he said, his face more relaxed than I'd seen in months. "Mia's going to stay for dinner, if that's okay." "Of course," I replied, trying to hide my surprise. "I'll set another place." Throughout dinner, I observed them carefully. There was no romantic tension, no flirtation, just the easy conversation of two people who had found unexpected common ground in shared trauma. Jacob explained the software project he was working on. Mia described the boutique hotel in Barcelona where she'd recently been promoted to manager. Most strikingly, Jacob laughed, genuinely laughed at Mia's story about a demanding British tourist who had insisted on bringing his pet ferret to the hotel spa. It was the first real laughter I'd heard from him since Christmas. After Mia excused herself to make a call to her parents, I raised an eyebrow at Jacob. "What?" he asked, though his small smile suggested he knew exactly what I was thinking. "Nothing," I said innocently. "She seems nice. The real her. I mean..." "She is," Jacob agreed. "Nothing like her. Not really. The surface details are the same where she worked. Her family background, but everything else is different. She's real, imperfect, honest." "I'm glad you met her," I said carefully. "Me too." Jacob's expression grew more serious. It helps, somehow, knowing there's a real Mia Garcia out there who's genuinely kind and decent. It makes what happened seem less personal, more mechanical. Alicia didn't target me specifically because of who I am. I was just a convenient vessel for her to exploit the real Mia's identity. It was an insightful observation, one that suggested his therapy was working, helping him process the experience in healthier ways. Over the next few days, Jacob and Mia spent considerable time together visiting the Spanish department at the university where I'd taught, taking her to see Austin's landmarks, even introducing her to Emma. They weren't dating, that much was clear, but they were forming a genuine friendship. Mia, meanwhile, met with Agent Collins several times, providing detailed statements about how her identity had been stolen and the impact it had on her life. The information she provided, combined with evidence from Jacob and previous victims, strengthened the case against Alicia Navarro significantly. "We've issued an international arrest warrant," Collins informed us during a joint meeting at my house. "Interpol has her on their red notice list. If she tries to cross any international border or uses any of her known aliases, she'll be detained." "What are the chances you'll actually catch her?" Jacob asked. Collins was honest. "It could take time. People like Alicia are skilled at disappearing, creating new identities, but we've disrupted her network, arrested several of her facilitators. She's running with fewer resources, fewer allies. Meanwhile, the real Mia suffers," Jacob noted, gesturing to where Mia sat quietly on the sofa. "Her life remains disrupted while Alicia roams free." "Actually," Collins said, "we may have some good news on that front. Our financial crimes unit has been working with Spanish authorities to clear Ms. Garcia's accounts. The freeze should be lifted within the week." Mia's face brightened. "Truly, that would make such a difference for my mother's treatments." "It's the least we can do," Collins assured her. After Collins departed, Mia seemed lost in thought, staring out the window at my garden where spring bulbs were beginning to emerge. "Are you all right?" I asked, joining her. "Just thinking about going home," she replied. "My flight is in 3 days. I am grateful for everything clearing my name, unfreezing my accounts, your hospitality, but I miss Barcelona. I miss my parents. Of course you do. This has been a lot to process. She turned to me, her expression earnest. Mrs. Brown, may I ask you something personal? Jennifer, please. And yes, of course. How did you know about Alicia? I mean, Jacob told me you were the first to suspect her. I explained about overhearing the phone conversation in Spanish that first evening, about recognizing the calculation in Alicia's voice when she thought no one could understand her. Mia nodded thoughtfully. You saved your son from great pain. He knows this now. I hope so, I said quietly. It hasn't been an easy road. The right path rarely is, she replied with a wisdom that seemed beyond her years. But you walked it anyway. That is what matters. The evening before Mia's departure, Jacob came over for a farewell dinner. The three of us enjoyed a meal that balanced American and Spanish dishes, sharing stories and even laughter as the strangeness of our connection faded into the background. After dinner, Jacob surprised me by producing a small gift box for Mia. Just to thank you, he explained as she opened it to reveal a delicate silver bracelet with a small charm of the Texas state outline. It's beautiful, Mia exclaimed, immediately putting it on. But you didn't need to. I wanted to, Jacob insisted. To commemorate an unexpected friendship born from bizarre circumstances, Mia smiled, touching the bracelet. I will treasure it, and perhaps, she hesitated. Perhaps someday, if either of you visit Barcelona, I can show you the real city, not the version Alicia described. I'd like that, Jacob said, his tone warm but not romantic, the response of someone offering genuine friendship without complications. Later, as Jacob was preparing to leave, he lingered in the hallway, waiting until Mia had gone upstairs. Mom, he said quietly, I'm going to be okay. 3 simple words, but they carried the weight of months of pain, healing, and gradual restoration. I know you are, I replied, hugging him tightly. You're stronger than you realize. I've been thinking, he continued, about taking some time off, maybe traveling for a while, clear my head, get some perspective. That sounds like a wonderful idea. Maybe even Spain, he added with a small smile. But not Barcelona. Not yet. That might be a bit much. One step at a time, I agreed. As he drove away, I felt the knot of worry that had lived in my chest since that first dinner with Alicia begin to loosen. Jacob was healing. The wounds would leave scars, but they wouldn't define him. The next morning, I drove Mia to the airport, our conversation easy and warm despite the short acquaintance. Thank you, she said earnestly as we approached the international terminal. For everything. The accommodation, the support, clearing my name. You don't need to thank me, I assured her. If anything, I should thank you for coming all this way to help build the case against Alicia. We both want the same thing, she said simply. Justice, and perhaps a little closure. I walked her as far as security would allow, watching as she joined the line for passport control. Just before she disappeared from view, she turned and waved, a genuine smile lighting her face. Driving home, I reflected on the strange journey of the past few months from that first dinner where I'd overheard Alicia's true intentions to this moment of unexpected resolution. Not the ending anyone had anticipated, but perhaps a better one than we might have hoped for under the circumstances. 2 weeks after Mia returned to Barcelona, Agent Collins called with news that sent shockwaves through our carefully reconstructed calm. We found her, she said without preamble. Alicia Navarro was arrested this morning attempting to enter Canada using a new identity. She's being extradited to the United States to face multiple fraud charges. My hand tightened around the phone. You're certain it's her? Positive fingerprint match, facial recognition, the works. It's definitely Alicia. Does Jacob know? Not yet. I wanted to inform you first. Give you the chance to decide how to handle it. I thought carefully about my son's progress, the delicate balance he'd achieved in recent weeks. He should hear it from me, I decided. And then we'll need him to identify her, provide testimony. The prosecution will want to interview him again. Prepare him as a witness if the case goes to trial. The prospect of Jacob having to face Alicia again, to relive the deception in a courtroom, made my stomach clench with protective instinct. But this was part of the healing process too, confronting the person who had caused such harm, participating in holding her accountable. I'll tell him tonight, I promised. Where is she being held? Federal Detention Center in Houston for now. The extradition process takes time, but we expect her to be transferred to Austin within the week for arraignment. After hanging up, I sat in Robert's study, gathering my thoughts before calling Jacob. How would he react? Would this news reopen wounds that were just beginning to heal? Or would it provide the closure he needed? When I finally reached him, his reaction surprised me. They caught her. His voice was calm, controlled. Where? I explained what Collins had told me, including the need for his testimony. I'll do whatever they need, he said without hesitation. She needs to face consequences. Mom, not just for what she did to me, but for the real Mia, for all the others she's harmed. Are you sure you're ready to see her again? To go through all of this in court? I'm sure, he replied with a certainty I hadn't heard from him in months. Dr. Winters and I have talked about this possibility. She thinks it could actually be therapeutic confronting Alicia, speaking my truth, being part of the justice process instead of just a passive victim. His words reflected significant emotional growth, a far cry from the shattered man who had sat in my living room clutching his grandmother's ring just months earlier. There's something else, he added after a pause. I've been thinking about contacting her other victims, Richard Donovan and Michael Pearson, the men she defrauded before me. Why? I asked, genuinely curious. Because we're connected by this experience. Because maybe talking to others who've been through it would help all of us process what happened. Create something positive from something terrible. It was a thoughtful, compassionate approach, finding community in shared trauma, working collectively toward healing. 5 days later, Jacob and I sat in the austere conference room at the federal prosecutor's office in downtown Austin. Assistant U.S. Attorney Melissa Rodriguez spread files across the table, laying out the case against Alicia Navarro. We're charging her with multiple counts of mail fraud, wire fraud, identity theft, and immigration fraud, she explained. The evidence is substantial financial records, communication with co-conspirators, testimony from previous victims. With your statements added, Mr. Brown, we have an extremely strong case. What kind of sentence are we looking at? Jacob asked. If convicted on all counts, she's facing 15 to 20 years, Rodriguez replied. Though realistically, with plea bargaining, probably 8 to 10. Jacob nodded, absorbing this information. And the others involved the actors who played her parents. Thomas Blackwell and Diane Rodriguez have already pleaded guilty to lesser charges in exchange for cooperation. They're providing valuable information about the broader network. What about the real Mia? I asked. Has she been formally cleared of any involvement? Yes, completely. We've issued official documentation confirming she was a victim of identity theft, not a participant in the fraud. Her financial accounts have been unfrozen, and Spanish authorities have been notified that she bears no responsibility for Alicia's actions. Relief washed over me. At least one innocent person had been fully exonerated. When will I need to identify her? Jacob asked, his voice steady. We've arranged a lineup for tomorrow morning, Rodriguez explained. You'll view the suspects through one-way glass. She won't be able to see you. Jacob's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. I'd rather face her directly. Rodriguez looked surprised. That's not standard procedure, Mr. Brown, and it could potentially traumatize. I'm not traumatized, Jacob interrupted firmly. I'm angry, and I want her to see that I'm not destroyed, that I'm part of the process, holding her accountable. The prosecutor exchanged glances with Agent Collins, who had been quietly observing from the corner. We might be able to arrange something after the formal identification, Collins suggested. A supervised confrontation, if the court approves it. Jacob nodded, satisfied. Thank you. The next morning, we arrived at the federal building where the identification would take place. Jacob was quiet during the drive. His focus turned inward as he prepared himself for seeing Alicia again. In the viewing room, we stood behind the one-way glass as 6 women of similar appearance were led into the lineup area. Alicia, or a woman who might be Alicia, stood in position number 4, wearing the same orange jumpsuit as the others. Her hair was pulled back severely, her face devoid of makeup, but there was no mistaking those calculating eyes. Number 4, Jacob said without hesitation. That's Alicia Navarro, also known as Mia Garcia. Agent Collins made a note on her clipboard. You're certain? Absolutely certain, Jacob confirmed, his gaze never leaving Alicia's face. I was engaged to her. I would recognize her anywhere. After the formal identification was complete, Collins spoke quietly with several officials. We've arranged for you to speak with her briefly. It's unusual, but given the circumstances and the strength of the case, the prosecutor has approved it. Jacob straightened his shoulders. I'm ready. They led us to an interview room, sterile, institutional, with a table bolted to the floor and chairs on either side. We waited in silence until the door opened and 2 guards escorted Alicia inside. Her hands were cuffed in front of her, but she walked with the same elegant posture I remembered. her head held high despite the circumstances. She showed no surprise at seeing Jacob, only a flicker of calculation crossing her features before her expression settled into practiced neutrality. "Jacob," she said, her voice softer than I remembered, more heavily accented, no longer maintaining the perfect American-influenced Spanish accent she'd cultivated as Mia. "I didn't expect to see you here." "I imagine there are many things you didn't expect," he replied evenly. "Being caught, for instance." A ghost of a smile touched her lips. "Everyone makes mistakes eventually." "Is that what I was to you?" "A mistake?" She regarded him thoughtfully, her head tilted slightly. "You were a job, Jacob, a target that matched the profile. Nothing more, nothing less." The brutal honesty seemed to satisfy him more than any excuse or justification might have. "Did you ever feel anything real, even once?" Alicia considered the question, and for a moment, something almost human flickered behind her eyes. "You were kind," she said finally. "Kinder than most. I appreciated that, even if it didn't change anything." Jacob nodded, as if this confirmed something he'd already suspected. "I've met the real Mia Garcia," he said, watching her reaction closely. "The woman whose identity you stole." Surprise registered briefly before she controlled it. "Have you? How enterprising of you. She's nothing like you pretended to be. She's genuine, decent, everything you're not. And yet you fell in love with my version of her," Alicia pointed out, a hint of her old arrogance surfacing. "What does that say about what you truly want in a partner? I wonder." I tensed, ready to intervene, but Jacob didn't take the bait. "It says I was deceived by a professional liar," he replied calmly. "But I'm not here to be manipulated again. I'm here to tell you that you failed. You didn't destroy me. You didn't get what you wanted. And now you're going to face consequences while I move forward with my life." Alicia's facade cracked slightly, annoyance flashing across her features. "Your mother," she said, glancing at me for the first time. "She ruined everything. The perfect operation, destroyed by an old woman who happened to speak Spanish." "Not an old woman," I corrected, meeting her gaze steadily. "A mother protecting her son. You should have done better research." Alicia's laugh held no humor. Clearly, a rare oversight in an otherwise flawless performance. "Not so flawless," Jacob countered. "Marcus Reynolds identified your previous identities within weeks. The actors you hired as parents made elementary mistakes about Barcelona. You were never as clever as you thought you were." The barb struck home. I could see it in the tightening of her jaw, the narrowing of her eyes. For people like Alicia, pride in their criminal skill was often their most vulnerable point. "Is there anything else?" she asked coldly. "Or did you just come to gloat?" "I came to see for myself that you're human," Jacob replied, "flawed, fallible, and now facing justice. It helps. Somehow." He stood, signaling the end of the confrontation. "Goodbye, Alicia. I won't be thinking about you anymore." As the guards prepared to escort her out, Alicia called after him. "She's real. You know, the woman in Madrid, the one whose identity I stole for Vegas and Denver, Sofia Alvarez. She's real too. And she has no idea what I've done with her life." The revelation hung in the air as she was led away. A final attempt to unsettle us, to assert some control over the situation. Outside the federal building, Jacob exhaled slowly, as if releasing months of tension. "That was not what I expected." "In what way?" I asked, watching him carefully. "I thought I'd feel more anger, hurt, something. But seeing her like that stripped of the performance, the charm, the carefully constructed persona, she seemed smaller, just a person who makes a living hurting others." And her parting shot about the other identity theft victim. Jacob considered this. "If it's true, we should tell Agent Collins. Make sure this Sophia person is notified, protected." He shook his head. "But it doesn't change anything for me. Seeing Alicia, saying what I needed to say, it feels like closing a chapter." As we walked to the car, Jacob surprised me by taking my hand, a gesture of affection he hadn't initiated since childhood. "Thank you, Mom," he said simply, "for everything." "That's what mothers do," I replied, echoing my words from Christmas Eve. "We protect our children, even when they don't realize they need protecting," he added with a rueful smile, "even when they resist it." "Especially then," I agreed. In the weeks that followed, Jacob seemed lighter, more present. He finished his therapy sessions with Dr. Winters, started a new project at work that excited him, and even cautiously rejoined his old social circle, explaining the situation with Alicia in simple, honest terms that discouraged gossip while acknowledging what had happened. 3 weeks after the confrontation, Jacob came to Sunday dinner with news. "I'm taking that time off we talked about," he announced over dessert. 3 months, starting in June. My boss approved the sabbatical. "That's wonderful," I said, genuinely pleased. "Have you decided where you'll go?" "Europe, I think, starting in London. Then maybe France, Italy." He paused, a small smile playing at his lips. "And yes, Spain, but not Barcelona. Madrid, I guessed." "Actually, I'm thinking Seville, new territory, no associations." He took a deep breath. "And I've been exchanging emails with the real Mia. She's doing well, her mother's responding to treatment. Her job at the hotel is going well. She's invited me to visit Barcelona when I'm ready." "As friends?" I asked carefully. "Definitely friends," he confirmed. "We're connected by this bizarre experience, but there's no romantic element. It would be too complicated, too loaded with associations to Alicia." I nodded, relieved at his self-awareness. "And Alicia, any updates on the case?" "Agent Collins called yesterday. Alicia's attorney is exploring a plea deal. They have so much evidence she knows a trial would likely end in maximum sentencing. She's offering information about the larger network in exchange for a reduced sentence." "Is that good or bad? In your view?" Jacob considered this thoughtfully. "Both, I guess. I want her to face full consequences for what she did to me. To Mia. To all her victims. But if her information helps shut down the network, prevents others from being victimized, that's meaningful too." His perspective reflected remarkable emotional maturity, balancing personal desires for justice with the broader social good. "Oh, and one more thing," he added, reaching into his pocket. "I want you to have this." He placed the velvet ring box on the table between us. "Grandmother's ring. I don't want it sitting in my drawer reminding me of what almost happened. I'd rather you keep it safe until there's a genuine reason to use it someday." I picked up the box, deeply moved by the gesture. "I'll keep it for you, for when the time is right." "No rush," he said with a genuine smile. "I'm actually enjoying being single right now, getting to know myself again, figuring out what I really want." As we finished our coffee, I found myself thinking of Robert, wishing he could see the man our son had become, not despite this painful experience, but partly because of how he'd faced it, processed it, and grown from it. "Your father would be proud of you," I said suddenly. "The way you've handled all of this." Jacob looked surprised, then thoughtful. "I think he would be proud of both of us. You fought for me when I couldn't see the danger. That took courage." Outside, spring rain tapped gently against the windows, washing away the last remnants of winter. In my garden, new growth pushed through the soil, resilient, determined, reaching toward the light, like Jacob, like me, like all those who face deception and betrayal, but refuse to let it define them. The imposter had come into our lives planning destruction, but in the end, she had inadvertently created something else, an opportunity for growth, for deeper connection, and for the kind of wisdom that only comes through overcoming adversity. Not the story we would have chosen, but one we had navigated together, emerging stronger on the other side. 6 months after Alicia Navarro's arrest, life had settled into a new normal. Jacob was halfway through his European sabbatical, sending regular updates from historic cities and coastal villages. His photographs showed a man reconnecting with joy, hiking in the Scottish Highlands, sampling wine in French countryside, exploring Roman ruins in Italy. Agent Collins called periodically with updates on the case. Alicia had accepted a plea deal, receiving an 8-year sentence in exchange for extensive cooperation, identifying other members of the fraud network. Her information had led to dozens of arrests across 3 countries, disrupting a criminal enterprise that had victimized hundreds of Americans. "She'll be eligible for parole in 5 years, Collins explained during her latest call. "With good behavior, possibly less, but her testimony has been invaluable. We've identified at least 20 other victims of similar schemes." "Including this Sophia person she mentioned?" I asked, remembering Alicia's parting revelation. "Yes, Sophia Alvarez. We found her in Madrid, another identity theft victim who had no idea her personal details were being used for fraud in America. Her situation is similar to Mia Garcia's, financial accounts frozen, reputation damaged, employment difficulties." "Has anyone spoken with her directly?" "Spanish authorities have. She's cooperating with the investigation, but her circumstances are challenging. She's a single mother caring for an elderly father with Parkinson's disease." The financial disruption from the identity theft has been devastating for her family. Something about Sophia's situation touched me deeply, another innocent bystander caught in Alicia's web of deception, struggling with consequences she'd done nothing to deserve. Is there any way to help her? I asked. Like we did with Mia. Officially, our jurisdiction is limited, Collins admitted. But unofficially, if a private citizen wanted to reach out, offer support, that would be entirely up to them. I understood the subtle suggestion. Just as I'd helped bring Mia to Austin to provide testimony, I could potentially do something similar for Sophia. After careful consideration and consultation with Jacob, who was enthusiastic about the idea, I arranged to travel to Madrid. Agent Collins provided contact information for Sofia Alvarez, along with an introduction explaining my connection to the case. 2 weeks later, I sat at an outdoor cafe in Madrid's Plaza Mayor, waiting nervously for a woman whose identity had been entangled with our family's story through no choice of her own. I recognized her from the photographs Collins had shared, dark hair pulled back in a practical ponytail, intelligent eyes tired from worry, a graceful way of moving despite obvious exhaustion. She approached cautiously, scanning the cafe before spotting me. "Mrs. Brown?" she asked in accented but clear English. "Yes," I confirmed, standing to greet her. "Thank you for meeting me, Ms. Alvarez. Sophia, please." She settled across from me, ordering coffee when the waiter appeared. "Agent Collins explained your situation. Your son was another victim of this woman." "Yes, Jacob nearly married her, believing she was Mia Garcia." Sophia shook her head in disbelief. "And I was her identity for the previous frauds, in Las Vegas and Denver. It is still difficult to comprehend." Over the next hour, Sophia shared her story, how Spanish authorities had questioned her about marriages she'd never entered into, how her bank had frozen her accounts pending investigation of suspicious transactions, how her employer had placed her on unpaid leave until her name was cleared. "The worst part is the timing," she explained, stirring her coffee absently. "My father's medication is expensive. Without access to my accounts, I've had to borrow money, take on debt, reduce his treatments. That's why I wanted to meet with you," I said carefully. "I know money can't undo the damage Alicia has caused, but I'd like to help ease the financial burden while your situation is being resolved." Sophia's expression registered surprise, then wariness. "That is very kind, but why would you do this? We are strangers." "Connected by circumstance," I replied. "What Alicia did affected both our families. Helping you feels like creating something positive from something terrible." She studied me thoughtfully. "Your son, Jacob, he suggested this. He did, actually. He's traveling in Europe now, healing from his own experience with Alicia. When I told him about your situation, he immediately asked how we could help." A smile softened Sophia's tired features. "He must be a good man." "He is," I agreed. "Despite everything, or perhaps because of it, he's become even more compassionate." We discussed practical arrangements, how financial assistance could help with her father's medical needs, legal fees for clearing her name, and temporary living expenses until her accounts were unfrozen. Sophia was proud but practical, accepting help with dignity rather than desperation. As our meeting concluded, Sophia reached across the table to take my hand. "Mrs. Brown Jennifer, thank you. Not just for the financial help, but for seeing me as a person, not just another victim in this story." "We're all more than what happens to us," I replied, thinking of Jacob's journey from devastation to renewal. Back in my hotel room that evening, I called Jacob, now in Portugal, to update him on the meeting. "How is she?" he asked immediately. "Resilient," I replied. "Exhausted, worried about her father, but determined to move forward. Reminds me a bit of the real Mia, actually. There's a genuineness to her that Alicia could never truly imitate." "I'm glad you met her," Jacob said. "It completes the circle somehow." "That's exactly how it feels," I agreed. "Like finding all the pieces of a puzzle we didn't know we were solving." "Speaking of completing circles," Jacob said, his tone shifting slightly, "I've decided to visit Barcelona next week." "To see Mia?" I asked carefully. "Yes, she's offered to show me the real Barcelona, not the version Alicia described." "As friends," he added quickly. "It feels like an important step reclaiming the experience, separating it from the fraud." "I think that's healthy," I assured him. "Creating new, authentic memories to replace the false ones. That's what this whole trip has been about," Jacob reflected. "Rediscovering what's real in the world and in myself." After our call, I stood by the hotel window, watching Madrid's evening lights flicker to life across the ancient city. From my vantage point, I could see families gathering for dinner, couples strolling hand in hand, the ordinary rhythm of lives untouched by the kind of deception that had altered our family's course. Yet even in that deception, we'd found unexpected gifts, deeper trust between Jacob and me, connections with genuinely good people like Mia and Sophia, and most importantly, the discovery of our own resilience. The next morning, I received an email from Sophia with a photograph attached, her father in his wheelchair, smiling broadly, holding a sign that read, "Thank you, Brown family," in carefully printed English. Her accompanying message was simple: "Your kindness has brought light to a dark time. My father's new medication begins tomorrow." I forwarded the photo to Jacob, adding, "Sometimes the best response to deception is creating truth elsewhere." His reply came minutes later. "Exactly. See you when I get home. Love you, Mom." 3 days later, as I prepared to return to Austin, Sophia invited me to dinner at her modest apartment. Her father, Miguel, greeted me warmly, his hands trembling from Parkinson's but his spirit vibrant. Sophia's 7-year-old daughter, Elena, showed me her school books and practiced her limited English with charming determination. Over a home-cooked meal of traditional Spanish dishes, we talked about family, resilience, and the strange circumstances that had brought us together. Miguel, with Sophia translating his more complex thoughts, spoke philosophically about finding unexpected connections in adversity. He says that bad people can steal identities, money, even time, Sophia translated. But they cannot steal who we truly are, our character, our kindness, our capacity for hope. Your father is very wise, I replied, deeply moved. He also says, Sophia continued with a small smile, that you must visit again, and bring your son next time. I'd like that, I said, realizing I meant it sincerely. Perhaps when Jacob finishes his European journey, as I prepared to leave, Elena presented me with a carefully drawn picture stick figures holding hands across what appeared to be the ocean, with friends written in wobbly letters at the bottom. She has been learning about maps, Sophia explained. This is us in Spain and you in Texas, still connected despite the distance. I carefully placed the drawing in my travel folder, touched by the child's simple representation of our unlikely bond. Back in Austin, life continued its forward motion. Summer faded into autumn, bringing cooler temperatures and the familiar rhythm of a new academic year. Though retired, I still marked the seasons by the school calendar, a habit from decades of teaching. Jacob returned from Europe in early October, tanned, relaxed, and noticeably more at peace than when he'd left. His visit with Mia in Barcelona had been healing. He reported walking the real streets of her neighborhood, meeting her actual parents, separating the authentic experience from Alicia's calculated fabrication. She's doing well, he told me over dinner his first night back. The hotel promoted her again. Her mother's cancer is in remission. She's dating someone new, a local chef she's known for years. And how was that for you? I asked carefully. Jacob smiled, understanding my concern. Completely fine. I'm genuinely happy for her. What I felt for Alicia's version of Mia was never real. It was a response to a carefully crafted performance designed to manipulate me. Seeing the actual Mia happy in her real life feels appropriate. Right. His insight reflected significant emotional growth, the ability to distinguish between authentic connection and manufactured intimacy, between the person he thought he loved and the performance designed to exploit him. I have something for you, he said, reaching into his bag. He pulled out a small package wrapped in tissue paper. From Sophia and her family. I stopped in Madrid on my way home. Inside was a beautiful hand-painted ceramic tile depicting a bridge spanning a river, with puentes no muros written along the bottom. Bridges, not walls, Jacob translated unnecessarily. You met them? I asked, touched by the gift's symbolism. For dinner, he confirmed. Elena has grown an inch since you saw her. Miguel is responding well to the new medication. His tremors are much less pronounced. Sophia has been reinstated at her job with back pay, thanks to the documentation from Agent Collins clearing her name. I'm so glad, they said, carefully placing the tile on my mantelpiece. They're good people who deserve none of what happened to them. Like us, Jacob added quietly. Good people caught in someone else's deception. 6 weeks later, as Thanksgiving approached, Jacob surprised me with an unexpected proposal. I've been thinking, he said during our Sunday coffee ritual. Why don't we do something different for Thanksgiving this year? Create new traditions instead of revisiting old ones. The suggestion made perfect sense. Last Thanksgiving had been the disastrous dinner with Alicia's fake parents, a painful memory neither of us wished to revisit. What did you have in mind? I asked. Actually, he looked slightly sheepish. I've invited some guests. I hope that's okay. Before I could ask who, he continued, Mia is coming to Texas for a hotel management conference that week. She asked if she could visit Austin while she's here, and I thought, why not invite Sophia and her family too? The conference is sponsoring Mia's trip, but I've offered to cover travel for Sophia, Miguel, and Elena. I stared at him, processing this unexpected suggestion. You want to have Thanksgiving with all of Alicia's identity theft victims. When he put it that way, it sounded bizarre, even darkly comical, but Jacob's expression was earnest. I know it seems strange, he acknowledged, but they're not just Alicia's victims to me. They're people I've come to care about, connections that emerged from something terrible. We're all linked by this experience, why not transform it into something meaningful? His logic was both peculiar and strangely beautiful, taking the fractured pieces of a painful experience and reassembling them into something intentional and positive. Plus, he added with a small smile, I figured it might help exorcise the ghost of last Thanksgiving. When you put it that way, I replied, finding myself warming to the idea. How could I possibly say no? And so began preparations for what Jacob dubbed our Reclamation Thanksgiving, a gathering of people connected not by blood or long-standing friendship, but by the shared experience of having their lives disrupted by the same deceiver. Mia arrived first, her conference in Houston ending 2 days before the holiday. Sophia, Miguel, and Elena followed the next day, their eyes wide with excitement at their first visit to America. Emma and her husband joined our unconventional gathering, bringing traditional side dishes and a curiosity about meeting the real women whose identities had been stolen. Thanksgiving Day dawned clear and crisp, perfect Texas fall weather. As I prepared the turkey, surrounded by new friends speaking a mixture of English and Spanish, I marveled at the unexpected community that had formed from the ashes of deception. Mia and Sophia, initially connected only by their shared experience as Alicia's unwitting identity sources, discovered common interests in literature and music. Jacob and Sophia's father, Miguel, despite the language barrier, bonded over a shared love of chess. Elena charmed everyone with her enthusiasm for American Thanksgiving traditions, especially the ceremonial pardoning of turkeys she'd learned about in school. As we gathered around the table, an eclectic, multilingual family of choice, Jacob raised his glass for a toast. To unexpected connections, he said, his voice steady and sincere. To finding authenticity in the aftermath of deception, and to the reminder that while some people enter our lives to take, others come to give, to share, to build bridges where there were only walls. To bridges, not walls, Sophia added, referencing the tile now displayed prominently on my mantelpiece. As we clinked glasses and began passing dishes, I caught Jacob's eye across the table. The pain that had shadowed his gaze for so long had lifted, replaced by something deeper, more grounded, the hard-won wisdom that comes only through adversity faced with courage. Later, as evening settled around us and conversations continued in the living room, Jacob joined me in the kitchen where I was preparing coffee. This was a good idea, I told him quietly. Unorthodox, but perfect in its own way. It feels like completion, he agreed. Taking back the narrative, reshaping it into something of our own making. Through the doorway, we could see our guests Mia teaching Emma a Spanish card game, Sophia translating her father's stories for an enthralled audience. Elena curled up with a new book about Texas history. The scene bore no resemblance to the calculated performance of last Thanksgiving, with its false parents and hidden agendas. This gathering was messy, authentic, and genuinely warm. You know, Jacob said thoughtfully. In a strange way, we owe Alicia something. Not gratitude, never that, but acknowledgement that her deception ultimately led us here, to these relationships, to this moment. To growth, I added. For both of us. Especially for me, he admitted. I've learned to look beneath surfaces, to value authenticity over performance, to trust my instincts and yours. I squeezed his hand. Words unnecessary between us. In the living room, someone suggested music. Sophia's clear voice began a Spanish folk song, soon joined by her father's rougher baritone. Mia added harmony, while Emma and her husband listened appreciatively. Elena danced in small circles, her shadow elongated by the firelight against the wall. Outside, stars appeared in the November sky, bright points of light in the darkness like truth emerging from deception, like authentic connections forged in the aftermath of fraud, like the resilient spirit that allows humans to transform pain into meaning. The imposter who had entered our lives intending harm had inadvertently created this moment of genuine community. this celebration of resilience and renewal. It wasn't the ending anyone had anticipated, but it was better, richer, more authentic than anything Alicia Navarro could have fabricated with all her calculated charm. And in that unexpected grace, we found our most complete victory.